Chapter 598. Letting out a soft sigh, Xiaochen knew that he couldn't sit idly by and watch the disciples of the Tianqi sect suffer. Xiaochen turned to Mufeng and said, "How many disciples of the Tianqi sect are there in Tianfeng Zone?" Xiaochen didn't know much about the situation of the Tianqi sect in Tianfeng Zone. In response to Xiaochen's question, Mufeng replied, "There are about 2,000 of them, but most of them are ordinary disciples. There are only 4 core disciples, excluding big brother Xiaochen and senior sister Gu. There were many factions in Tianfeng Zone, and the 3 strongest factions were naturally the Evil Temple, the White Mist sect, and the Iron Sword sect. Compared to them, the Tianqi sect was indeed too weak. The strongest person in the Tianqi sect was undoubtedly Xiaochen, while the 3 factions of the Iron Sword sect not only held important positions among the core disciples, but they also had 2 people in each of the top 10 core disciples." Upon hearing Mufeng's words, Xiaochen muttered to himself, 2,000 people, huh? There were a total of 2,000 people in the Tianqi sect, which exceeded Xiaochen's expectations. But after thinking about it, it was normal and could even be said to be too little. After all, even though every disciple in Tianfeng Zone was an elite, there were still as many as 100,000 of them, especially ordinary disciples. Without much hesitation, Xiaochen asked Mufeng to inform the disciples of the Tianqi sect that if they were willing to face the Iron Sword sect with him, they could gather at training field number 4 tomorrow. Upon hearing Xiaochen's words, Mufeng was overjoyed. He naturally knew what Xiaochen meant. All along, Xiaochen didn't have any feelings for the Tianqi sect and wasn't prepared to care about their matters. Now that he took the initiative to gather everyone, his purpose was self-evident. Mufeng nodded immediately. Then, the 4 of them chatted for a while before parting ways. Xiaochen and the other 2 returned to the core disciple area. After sending Gu Lingyao back to her residence, Xiaochen returned to his residence alone. After not returning for a night, the 4 maids were naturally worried. After seeing Xiaochen return, although they didn't dare to ask further, Xiaochen could see the deep concern in their eyes. "What's wrong? We're in Tianfeng Zone. Are you worried that something will happen to me?" Xiaochen said with a smile as he looked at the 4 girls. "No, but senior brother Xiaochen should be careful. That Bai Zhong is narrow-minded and vengeful. This time, he suffered such a big loss at the hands of senior brother Xiaochen. He definitely won't let it go." The 4 girls understood Bai Zhong's character very well and guessed that Bai Zhong definitely wouldn't let it go. Since he wasn't Xiaochen's opponent, Bai Zhong would definitely use some underhanded means. As the saying goes, it's easier to dodge an open spear than an arrow in the dark. There was no doubt about Xiaochen's strength, but he still had to be careful. Knowing what the 4 girls meant, Xiaochen smiled and nodded. Then, he returned to his room alone and began his daily cultivation. He didn't tell the 4 girls about the Iron Sword sect. One must know that Xiaochen didn't only have to face Bai Zhong alone, but also the Iron Sword sect. Compared to the troubles of the Iron Sword sect, Bai Zhong was nothing. After a silent night of cultivation, Xiaochen cultivated peacefully until the next morning. As usual, he cultivated for a while in the courtyard until Gu Lingyao came to find him. Then, the 2 of them went to the 4th training field together. There were a total of 10 training fields in Tianfeng Zone. They were distributed in different places, and the 4th training field was located in the ordinary disciple area. When Xiaochen and Gu Lingyao arrived at the 4th training field, the disciples of the Tianqi sect had already gathered there. At the same time, the disciples of the other sects had already been asked to leave. Such a situation wasn't uncommon in Tianfeng Zone. After all, there were so many sections. Sometimes, when people from one sect gathered together, they naturally had to clear the field. Therefore, under normal circumstances, as long as it wasn't too excessive, the other disciples wouldn't say anything. After all, if there was one less training field, they could still go to other training fields. The disciples of the Tianqi sect had already arrived in advance. Looking at the dense crowd of more than 2,000 people, Xiaochen led Gu Lingyao all the way to the front of the crowd. Here, Xiaochen saw Zhang Tao, Li Chengwang, and the other core disciples of the Tianqi sect. Looking at the bruises on their faces, it was obvious that the four of them had also been beaten up. Looking at Zhang Tao and the other three without changing his expression, Xiaochen asked indifferently, "You guys were beaten up too? Was it done by the people of the Iron Sword sect?" In the face of Xiaochen's inquiry, Zhang Tao and Li Changwang were too embarrassed to look at Xiaochen. They dodged his gaze and nodded slightly. He didn't expect that even Zhang Tao and the other three would be beaten up by the people of the Iron Sword sect. It seemed that other than himself and Gu Lingyao, the other people of the Tianqi sect had been beaten up to varying degrees. Facing Zhang Tao and Li Changwang again, Xiaochen didn't feel any hatred in his heart. Moreover, the two of them didn't come looking for him after being beaten up by the people of the Iron Sword sect. It could be seen that the two of them still had some backbone. If the two of them came crying to him after being beaten up, then Xiaochen would really look down on them from the bottom of his heart. Having no intention of arguing with the two of them, Xiaochen smiled slightly and said, "The previous matter is in the past. Don't take it to heart. Don't worry, I won't let the people of the Iron Sword sect act recklessly in the future," Xiaochen said indifferently. Hearing these words, Zhang Tao and Li Changwang were on the same side at first, but soon they were full of shame. Last time, the two of them were so arrogant in front of Xiaochen, but Xiaochen didn't hold a grudge at all. With this comparison, the two of them were naturally ashamed. At this moment, Zhang Tao and Li Changwang sincerely admired Xiaochen. Not only because of his strength, but also because of Xiaochen's breadth of mind. It should be known that among the core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong, there were many people who were as narrow-minded and vengeful as Bai Zhong. However, Xiaochen wasn't like that. He smiled and wiped away all enmity. Xiaochen had clearly told the two of them what had happened in the past, and he had already forgotten about it. Smiling at the two of them, Xiaochen then turned his head and glanced at the more than 2,000 disciples of the Tianqi sect present, and said with a serious expression, "Everyone, I don't think I need to say more about what has happened recently. The Iron Sword sect has gone too far. I believe that everyone present has been beaten up by the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Regarding this, I would like to apologize to everyone. Everything happened because of me, Xiaochen. During the Sage Sect selection, I personally killed the 3 great disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Because of my actions, you have been implicated. I, Xiaochen, am sorry to everyone. Today, I have called everyone here for only one purpose. Those who are willing to follow me, Xiaochen, against the Iron Sword sect, I welcome them. Those who don't want to get involved in this matter can also leave. I, Xiaochen, can also guarantee that no one from the Iron Sword sect will cause trouble for you in the future." Chapter 599. Xiaochen's voice was sonorous and forceful. He did not hide the ins and outs of the whole matter. He calmly admitted that all of this was because of him. He was willing to stand up for the disciples of the Tianqi sect. At the same time, even if someone wanted to leave, Xiaochen could also protect their safety. Otherwise, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect would continue to harm them. Xiaochen's words were not hypocritical at all. He spoke very sincerely. At the same time, this was indeed what Xiaochen was thinking. Since the matter was caused by him, he naturally had to bear the responsibility alone. Even if no one from the Tianqi sect stood on his side today, Xiaochen would not shrink back in the slightest. Even if he had to fight against the entire Iron Sword sect on his own, even if it was like a moth flying into a flame, Xiaochen was not afraid. As soon as his voice fell, Xiaochen did not say anything more. He stood quietly on the spot, waiting for everyone to make their choice. More than 2,000 pairs of eyes stared at Xiaochen. Before this, everyone had thought of many possibilities, such as quibbling, all kinds of high-sounding words, and winning over people's hearts. However, no one had expected that Xiaochen would actually admit everything so calmly. Moreover, he did not have the slightest intention of winning over the crowd. Many people were puzzled. Was Xiaochen really not afraid that someone would vent their anger on him? After all, everyone present had suffered an undeserved calamity. When the time came, if no one was willing to stand on Xiaochen's side, would Xiaochen really have to fight against the Iron Sword sect on his own? However, despite their doubts, everyone still felt a touch of gratitude and admiration. At least Xiaochen was very sincere and did not have the slightest intention of evading the matter. Everyone was silent. In this regard, Xiaochen did not urge them. After a while, Zhang Tao spoke first. This person who had some disagreements with Xiaochen had actually become the first person to stand up. Zhang Tao turned to look at the disciples of the Tianqi sect and shouted loudly, "Senior brothers and junior brothers, do you all think that senior brother Xiaochen is solely responsible for this? To put it bluntly, the reason why the Iron Sword sect dares to be so unbridled is none other than because we are too weak. Let me ask you, would the Iron Sword sect still dare to be so unbridled when facing the Devil Evil Temple and the White Mist sect? We're all from the Celestial Equal sect and are of the same spirit and branch. Since senior apprentice brother Xiaochen is willing to stand up for us, I, Zhang Tao, will follow senior apprentice brother Xiaochen from today onwards. I'm willing to go through hell and high water for senior apprentice brother Xiaochen and get rid of those bastards from the Iron Sword sect." Zhang Tao shouted loudly. Hearing his words, Li Changwang and the other 2 core disciples also shouted, "We're willing to go through hell and high water for senior apprentice brother Xiaochen." They did not expect that the first person to stand up would actually be Zhang Tao. At the same time, because Zhang Tao was a veteran core disciple, although his strength was not as strong as Xiaochen's, his prestige in the Celestial Equal sect was not low. With Zhang Tao, Li Changwang, and the other 3 core disciples taking the lead to express their stance, the other disciples of the Celestial Equal sect did not hesitate too much. Soon, they also expressed their willingness to follow Xiaochen to fight against the Iron Sword sect. Although the matter was caused by Xiaochen, the disciples did not have much hatred for Xiaochen in their hearts. The reason was very simple. Such matters were not uncommon. Xiaochen had killed the 3 great disciples of the Iron Sword sect and formed a grudge with the Iron Sword sect. All of this could only be attributed to the Iron Sword sect's inferior skills. If they really wanted to blame someone, they could only blame the Celestial Equal sect for being too weak. Just as Zhang Tao had said, if it were the Devil Evil Temple or the White Mist sect, would the Iron Sword sect still dare to be so unscrupulous? Everyone present was a hot-blooded young genius. Everyone knew that Xiaochen was not at fault in this matter. However, Xiaochen still bravely stood up and took responsibility for everything. Just this point alone was enough to make the disciples sincerely admire him. More than 2,000 disciples of the Celestial Equal sect expressed their willingness to follow Xiaochen. It was only at this moment that Xiaochen finally received the acknowledgement of many disciples of the Celestial Equal sect. Hearing the disciples shouting in unison, Xiaochen was not as excited as he had imagined. At this moment, a group of about 50 to 60 people strode into the 4th training field. Seeing this group of people appear, the disciples of the Celestial Equal sect immediately wanted to stop them. However, Xiaochen stopped them. Xiaochen knew this group of people. They were the young geniuses of the Heavenly Qin continent. They were also the ones who had joined the Tianfeng Xingzong this time. They strode in front of Xiaochen and said to Xiaochen in a serious tone, "Senior brother Xiaochen, we also want to join the Celestial Equal sect. We want to follow you." These young geniuses from the Heavenly Qin continent took the initiative to ask to join the Celestial Equal sect. Xiaochen was not surprised when he heard this. It was no exaggeration to say that the relationship between these people was incomparable. It was not for any other reason, but because they all came from the Heavenly Qin continent and had the same hometown. In the Tiana continent, they could trust and rely on each other. Xiaochen did not refuse their request and nodded in agreement. It could be said that today, because of Xiaochen's appearance, the entire Celestial Equal sect was united. From now on, the Celestial Equal sect would no longer be like before. It was like they had truly found a backbone. Previously, although the Celestial Equal sect was a whole to the outside, they were not united internally. The reason was very simple. Zhang Tao and the other 3 core disciples had similar prestige in the Celestial Equal sect. The 4 of them were not convinced by each other. As a result, there was no real leader in the Celestial Equal sect. Or rather, there was no one who could truly convince everyone. But now, with the appearance of Xiaochen, Zhang Tao and the other 3 core disciples were all convinced. With a backbone, the disciples of the Celestial Equal sect seemed to have been reborn. They were no longer independent like before. Things went unexpectedly smoothly. The disciples also believed that under Xiaochen's leadership, the Celestial Equal sect would definitely undergo earth-shaking changes. They believed in senior brother Xiaochen. Everyone cheered. However, at this moment, a group of uninvited guests arrived. There were not many of them, only 4 people. However, the appearance of these 4 people caused the expressions of the Celestial Equal sect disciples to change drastically. This was because the person leading them was wearing the celestial wind robe of the top 10 direct disciples. The wide robe fluttered in the wind as he looked at the newcomers. Xiaochen did not recognize the newcomers, but Zhang Tao took the initiative to introduce them to Xiaochen. Senior brother Xiaochen, that person is He Chuxuan. He's ranked 10th among the top 10 direct disciples. He Chuxuan. He had heard of this name before, but he had never seen him before. He did not expect him to arrive so soon. He Chuxuan walked into the 4th training field with 3 core disciples of the Iron Sword sect. He Chuxuan appeared very indifferent from the beginning to the end. He ignored the disciples of the Celestial Equal sect and walked straight towards Xiaochen. Chapter 600. He Chuxuan acted as though the 2,000+ disciples of the Tianqi sect were nothing but air, or perhaps he felt that these people were ants that he could easily crush. Anyway, along the way, he did not even look at the people present. His eyes were looking straight ahead, at Gu Lingyao, who was behind Xiaochen. There were only 4 of them, but none of the disciples of the Tianqi sect dared to step forward to stop them. This was the deterrence of the top 10 personal disciples. One person could make 2,000+ people fearful. It was not only because of He Chuxuan's strength, but also because of his identity as one of the top 10 personal disciples. This position was no weaker than the elders of the Glory sect. If He Chuxuan was angered, he would really dare to kill. In front of the top 10 personal disciples, there was no need to talk about the rules of the Glory sect. This was because it was useless. The world was like this. As long as you had strength and value, you could break some rules. Therefore, even if the top 10 personal disciples killed someone in the Glory sect, nothing would happen. At most, they would be punished slightly and put on a show. The disciples of the Tianqi sect took the initiative to open up a path. Soon, He Chuxuan's group of 4 arrived in front of Xiaochen. However, the 3 core disciples stood still. He Chuxuan did not even look at Xiaochen. He walked past him and arrived in front of Gu Lingyao. Ignored. Blatant disregard. Moreover, after standing in front of Gu Lingyao, He Chuxuan pretended to be gentle and said, "Lingyao, why are you here too?" His attitude towards Gu Lingyao could be said to be extremely gentle. In response, Gu Lingyao said with a face of displeasure, "Why can't I be here? I was originally a disciple of the Tianqi sect. As for you, what are you trying to do here? Do you want to deal with us?" Facing He Chuxuan, Gu Lingyao did not have a good expression. However, after hearing Gu Lingyao's words, He Chuxuan did not seem to care at all. He still had a smile on his face as he said, "I have something to do here. I am indeed here for some matters. You know that Xiaochen beat up people from the Iron Sword clan yesterday. However, since you are here, Lingyao, I will give you some face today." He Chuxuan did not hide his intentions, but then said that he was willing to give face to Gu Lingyao. It felt like he was saying, "I won't do anything to Xiaochen today. However, when you're not around in the future, I won't let Xiaochen go." He Chuxuan was no stranger to Gu Lingyao. This was because ever since Gu Lingyao entered Tianfengxing Zone, He Chuxuan had met her for the first time by chance. Then, he began to pursue Gu Lingyao fiercely. However, it was a pity that Gu Lingyao already had Xiaochen in her heart. In addition, the relationship between the two of them had just been confirmed. As a result, it was even more impossible for Gu Lingyao to accept He Chuxuan. He Chuxuan was even more displeasing to Gu Lingyao because of the incident with the Iron Sword sect. He Chushuan was about to angrily rebuke him, but Xiaochen came to Gu Lingyao's side first. Xiaochen also knew a little about He Chushuan's pursuit of Gu Lingyao. Of course, this was all told to him by that little girl, Wang Fang. She said that she was afraid that Gu Lingyao would be snatched away by others. After all, He Chushuan was one of the top 10 pro-disciples. However, Xiaochen was not worried about He Chushuan's pursuit of Gu Lingyao at all. This was because Gu Lingyao would never fall for him. Xiaochen was very confident about this. He had never treated He Chushuan as a threat. He was also not afraid that Gu Lingyao would have a change of heart. However, even if he was not afraid, it was a little too much to try to steal someone from him in front of him. Therefore, Xiaochen stood up without hesitation. He put his arm around Gu Lingyao's shoulder and pulled her into his arms domineeringly. Then, he said with a faint smile on his face, "Lingyao, do you know senior brother He? Xiaochen, let go of your dog's paw." Xiaochen's domineering action made Gu Lingyao's face turn red. He Chushuan, who was standing at the side, shouted angrily. He Chushuan was enraged that Xiaochen was hugging the woman he liked in front of him. Hearing his angry shout, Xiaochen's smile did not diminish. "I'm hugging my woman. Is senior brother He going to interfere? Xiaochen, are you courting death?" Hearing this, He Chushuan was on the verge of exploding. Everyone knew that he adored Gu Lingyao. Now that Xiaochen was flirting with Gu Lingyao in front of him, He Chushuan's heart was filled with killing intent. Sensing the faint killing intent coming from He Chushuan, Xiaochen did not care at all. Moreover, in front of everyone, Xiaochen did something that made He Chushuan almost go berserk. Xiaochen, who was hugging Gu Lingyao, lowered his head and kissed Gu Lingyao's lips in front of He Chushuan and everyone else. Seeing this, He Chushuan was stunned. The anger in his heart continued to rise. At this moment, He Chushuan had decided that even if he would be punished by Sage Sect, he would kill Xiaochen with his own hands today. He Chushuan felt humiliated for the first time in his life. The woman he adored was being kissed by another man. Moreover, Gu Lingyao did not resist at all. On the contrary, she hugged Xiaochen's waist and shyly welcomed Xiaochen's actions. Humiliation, hatred, killing intent. All kinds of emotions merged in He Chushuan's heart. After a while, Xiaochen let go of Gu Lingyao and said to He Chushuan with a smile on his face, "Lingyao is my woman. Senior brother He, don't be mistaken. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I will do." Xiaochen did this to declare his sovereignty. What a joke! He Chushuan really thought that he was a big shot by trying to steal Gu Lingyao in front of him? Hearing Xiaochen's words, He Chushuan looked at Gu Lingyao, who was blushing and breathing rapidly. He Chushuan laughed out of anger. "Ha, good, very good. Xiaochen, you have successfully angered me. No one can save you today." As He Chushuan spoke, a powerful aura erupted from his body. He stared at Xiaochen with a murderous look in his eyes. Xiaochen was not afraid at all. He smiled and said, "Is that so? However, I'm not as bold as senior brother He. After all, this is Sage Sect. Therefore, I don't dare to take senior brother's life. How about this, I'll break senior brother He's limbs today. Senior brother, you should feel lucky." As he spoke, a terrifying aura rose from Xiaochen's body. The auras of the two were fighting against each other. Their eyes met and sparks were about to fly. It was not only because of the Iron Sword sect, but also because of He Chushuan's desire for Gu Lingyao. Xiaochen was really angry at this moment. Therefore, even though He Chushuan was one of the top 10 pro-disciples, Xiaochen did not back down. Chapter 601. He Chushuan couldn't wait to tear Xiaochen apart. However, wasn't Xiaochen the same? The Iron Sword sect was overbearing, and He Chushuan was even coveting his woman. Since young, Xiaochen had always been a possessive woman. How could she allow others to touch her woman? Therefore, facing He Chushuan, the killing intent in Xiaochen's heart was no less than his. However, Xiaochen was clear that He Chushuan was one of the 10 direct disciples after all. If he killed Xiaochen, he might not be severely punished. However, if Xiaochen killed him, the disciplinary hall would not let him off. Therefore, Xiaochen suppressed the killing intent in his heart. Indeed, it wasn't the best time to kill He Chushuan and Glory Sect. He could spare his life for now. Although he could avoid the death penalty, he couldn't escape punishment. With his status, although he couldn't kill He Chushuan directly, breaking his limbs wasn't a problem at all. The aura of the two continued to climb. Sensing the increasingly tense atmosphere around them, it wasn't just the Tianqi sect disciples. Even the 3 core disciples who came with He Chushuan began to retreat. As they retreated, the crowd's gaze never left Xiaochen and He Chushuan. The 3 core disciples who came with He Chushuan shouted coldly at this moment. "Humph, reckless fool. This guy is already the first core disciple. How dare he fight with senior brother He?" That's right. Even if he's the first core disciple, there's still a huge gap between him and the 10 direct disciples. This guy probably doesn't know how terrifying the 10 direct disciples are. He thinks that he can fight with senior brother He. Let's see how senior brother He kills this guy later. The 3 of them mocked one after another. On the other side, the group of disciples from the Celestial Equal sect looked at Xiaochen with worry and admiration at the same time. Everyone was worried about Xiaochen's safety. After all, the 10 core disciples were not easy to deal with. How could he become a core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong if he didn't have the ability? One must know that the 10 core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong had to rely on their own strength to fight their way up. Secondly, they had to rely on the existence of Tianfeng Saint. Therefore, none of the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong could possibly be an embroidered pillow. He was worried about Xiaochen's safety, but at the same time, he admired Xiaochen's courage. In the face of one of the top 10 personal disciples, Xiaochen dared to face them head-on. In Tianfeng Xingzong, there was probably no other person who could do this. Under everyone's gaze, He Chushuan shouted coldly and took the initiative to attack. His legs fiercely stomped on the ground, tearing it apart. His entire body shot towards Xiaochen like a cannonball. You think you can be arrogant just because you defeated Bai Zhong? Xiaochen, die for me. Today, I will let you know that defeating that trash Bai Zhong is nothing at all. As he spoke, He Chushuan had already arrived in front of Xiaochen. He fiercely threw a punch. Bursts of sonic booms rang out. Before the punch arrived, the terrifying wind had already blown Xiaochen's cheeks, causing incomparable pain. The strength of the top 10 personal disciples was indeed not to be underestimated. They had completely surpassed the level of the King of Prides. Xiaochen had not yet fought with He Chushuan, but he was already certain that He Chushuan was definitely the strongest person of the younger generation he had encountered so far. In the Tianqian continent, the King of Prides was already the peak of the younger generation. However, in the Tiana continent, there were still direct disciples above the King of Prides. This was the first time he fought with a direct disciple. While he felt great pressure, Xiaochen's heart also burned with a raging battle intent. Without dodging or avoiding, he faced He Chushuan's fist with a punch. With a loud bang, the wind was rampant. The ground was like a piece of paper being torn apart inch by inch. Cracks spread in all directions. Choosing the most direct confrontation, watching the two of them collide, the crowd once again distanced themselves. At the same time, they looked towards the battlefield in horror. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. After a few dozen breaths, when the smoke and dust slowly dissipated, the figures of Xiaochen and He Chushuan appeared in front of everyone once again. They saw that the two of them did not suffer any injuries, but Xiaochen was forced to retreat a few steps. It seemed that in the previous confrontation, Xiaochen was at a disadvantage. However, even so, no one mocked him, including the 3 core disciples who came with He Chushuan. At this time, the 3 of them did not have the slightest trace of ridicule on their faces. Instead, they were deeply shocked. It was very simple. Xiaochen was only a core disciple. Even if he was the number 1 core disciple, there should still be an insurmountable gap between him and the top 10 direct disciples. However, at this moment, after the direct confrontation between Xiaochen and He Chushuan, he was actually not injured. he was only forced to retreat a few steps. This result was indeed enough to make everyone stunned. One must know that in the previous batches, the number 1 core disciple was absolutely not a match for the top 10 direct disciples. Ignoring everyone's gaze, Xiaochen shook his numb arm. In his heart, he did not feel the slightest excitement because he blocked He Chushuan's punch. On the contrary, Xiaochen felt a little helpless in his heart. Xiaochen was able to feel the strength of one of the top 10 personal disciples the most directly after taking that punch head-on. He had to admit that he was still not as good as He Chushuan, who was one of the top 10 personal disciples. It seems that I have underestimated the top 10 direct disciples. He Chushuan is only ranked last among the top 10 direct disciples. However, it is precisely because of this that it is interesting. Otherwise, why would I come to the Tiana continent? He sighed helplessly. But soon, the helplessness in his heart was dispelled by a strong fighting spirit. Without hesitation, this time, Xiaochen took the initiative to attack. The storage ring in his hand flashed, and the ink dragon sword appeared in his hand. He used the ferocious tiger stampede and the tempered battle body. His figure instantly appeared in front of He Chushuan. In the face of Xiaochen's active attack, He Chushuan had gone completely crazy. He also summoned his heavenly weapon, a blood-red long saber. The saber and the sword collided, and the two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. He Chushuan was extremely displeased that his punch did not directly injure Xiaochen. He was one of the top 10 direct disciples. Except for the other 9 direct disciples, He Chushuan looked down on everyone else. However, in the face of someone he looked down on, Xiaochen, he was able to block his attack. Although he was at a disadvantage, he did not suffer any injuries. In other words, Xiaochen had the strength to contend with him. When he thought that Xiaochen's strength was enough to contend with him, He Chushuan felt as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. His attacks became fiercer and fiercer, and the killing intent in his eyes became more and more intense. He shouted coldly, "Xiaochen, I will kill you today." Chapter 602. The saber and the sword collided. The speed of the two people who were fighting fiercely left everyone speechless. At the same time, no one would have thought that the sword and saber techniques would give off a different feeling in the hands of these two people. It was as if they had a life of their own. In terms of the understanding of the sword principle and the saber principle, Xiaochen and He Chushuan had already reached an extremely high level. Not to mention those of the same generation, even the experts of the older generation might not necessarily be stronger than the two of them. They seemed to be different moves, but when they were executed by the two of them, they were stronger than others. Their power was incomparable. Such an exciting battle left everyone present dumbfounded. They were not the only ones. Due to the terrifying aftermath of the battle between Xiaochen and He Chushuan, many disciples had gathered around the 4th training field. At this time, there were no less than 30,000 disciples gathered around the 4th training field. Most of them were ordinary disciples. After all, the 4th training field was within the ordinary disciples' area. Although they did not know the cause and effect of the battle, it did not prevent the disciples from being shocked by the intense battle. At the same time, after recognizing the identities of Xiaochen and Xiaochen, the disciples could not remain calm. He Chushuan's identity was the easiest to recognize because the heavenly wind long robe he was wearing was extremely eye-catching. His identity could be confirmed at a glance. As for Xiaochen, although no one recognized him at first, very soon, someone revealed Xiaochen's identity. As the person who had been in the limelight recently, many people had seen Xiaochen. After knowing the identities of Xiaochen and Xiaochen, the disciples were all shocked. Of course, most of them were shocked by Xiaochen. After all, Xiaochen was only a core disciple. However, at this time, he could fight He Chushuan to a standstill. Is senior brother Xiaochen so strong? He can actually fight evenly with one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Many disciples said in surprise. Although it was obvious that Xiaochen was obviously at a disadvantage in the fierce battle, so what? He Chushuan still could not defeat Xiaochen. Just as the disciples were amazed, He Chushuan was unusually irritated at this time. He thought that he could easily crush an ant, but he could not do anything to him. Even though He Chushuan had the upper hand, that was all there was to it. Xiaochen was not completely defenseless. Up until now, Xiaochen had been busy defending himself. On the other hand, He Chushuan was unable to inflict serious damage on Xiaochen for the time being. Xiaochen's combat strength was beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that Xiaochen could fight He Chushuan for so long without being defeated? To be honest, after fighting He Chushuan for so long, Xiaochen had a rough understanding of He Chushuan's strength. Although he was at a disadvantage against He Chushuan, his strength was indeed inferior to He Chushuan's. However, the gap between the two of them was not big. It could even be said that it was very small. Because of this, although Xiaochen was weaker than He Chushuan, it was impossible for He Chushuan to defeat him. To put it bluntly, Xiaochen could not defeat He Chushuan, but He Chushuan could not do anything to him either. Neither of them could do anything to the other. It was just that He Chushuan had the upper hand in the battle. While fighting fiercely, Xiaochen's gaze fell on the heavenly wind robe that He Chushuan was wearing. Previously, Xiaochen thought that the heavenly wind robe was just a symbol of status. However, after fighting He Chushuan, he realized that the heavenly wind robe was not only extremely eye-catching, but it was also a defensive heaven-level upper-grade treasure. Up until now, he had lost count of how many of his attacks had been blocked by the heavenly wind robe. It was definitely a good item. It was no wonder that in the entire Tianfengxian zone, only the top 10 pro-disciples could have it. Moreover, once he was kicked out of the top 10 pro-disciples, he would have to hand over the heavenly wind robe. Xiaochen liked He Chushuan's heavenly wind robe very much. He had already decided that in the future, he would definitely become one of the top 10 pro-disciples. It was not for anything else, but for the heavenly wind robe. Xiaochen had already given up on the idea of defeating He Chushuan, because it was simply impossible. On the other hand, He Chushuan was already extremely irritated. In He Chushuan's eyes, the surrounding disciples seemed to be mocking him. As one of the top 10 pro-disciples, he could not even defeat a core disciple. This was a slap to his face. His attacks became fiercer and fiercer, and he used all kinds of techniques. However, in the face of He Chushuan's violent attacks, Xiaochen neutralized them one by one. Chun Jun Sword Finger, Triple Overlapping Waves, Dragon Spring Sword Finger, Tai Yi Sword Finger, Ganjiang Sword Finger, Square Heaven Sword Shadow, and many other martial techniques were used by Xiaochen one by one, neutralizing He Chushuan's attacks one by one. He could not hurt Xiaochen at all. At this time, Xiaochen sneered and said, "Senior brother it seems like there won't be a result today. You can't do anything to me." Xiaochen was telling the truth. He Chushuan could not do anything to He Chushuan. However, He Chushuan was furious when he heard Xiaochen's words. He fiercely slashed out with his blade. Seeing this, Xiaochen raised his sword to block, exquisitely blocking He Chushuan's blade. At the same time, He Chushuan was on the verge of going crazy as he shouted angrily. "Ah, Xiaochen, I want you dead." What happened today made He Chushuan feel so ashamed that he could not show his face. His pride as one of the top 10 pro-disciples had been ruthlessly trampled under Xiaochen's feet. A top 10 pro-disciple could not take down a core disciple. If this news spread out, it would be a joke. It could even be said that because of this battle, many disciples of Tianfengxian zone would have a lower impression of the top 10 pro-disciples. Originally, the top 10 pro-disciples were invincible in the eyes of the disciples of Tianfengxian zone. But now, He Chushuan was forced into such a desperate situation by Xiaochen. In this way, the other disciples would naturally think that the top 10 pro-disciples were not invincible. At least, the number 1 core disciple, Xiaochen, was enough to compete with them even if he was only facing He Chushuan, the weakest of the top 10 pro-disciples. Facing He Chushuan's angry roar, Xiaochen laughed softly and said indifferently, "Senior brother if words could kill, perhaps I would really be dead. But unfortunately, words cannot kill, so you are destined to not be able to kill me." Hearing Xiaochen's words, He Chushuan directly spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly withered. This was caused by anger. However, in the face of such an opportunity, Xiaochen naturally would not let it go. He directly stabbed out with his sword, aiming directly at Ichushuan's chest. However, at this moment, without any warning, a golden light flashed. Immediately, Xiaochen felt a fatal threat sweep over his body. Chapter 603. The golden light flashed and aimed at Xiaochen's chest. Along with the appearance of the golden light, Xiaochen did not hesitate and chose to retreat immediately. He did not care about continuing to attack Ichushuan. The appearance of the golden light was too strange. There was no warning at all. Xiaochen successfully dodged the attack by retreating in time. The golden light flew past Xiaochen and hit the ground below. The ground, which was already full of holes, became even worse as it was completely torn apart by the tiny golden light. This attack was absolutely terrifying. After narrowly dodging it, Xiaochen turned his head and looked at the empty sky. Along with Xiaochen's gaze, he saw a young man wearing the same heavenly wind robe appear in the sky. The young man's face was gloomy. At first glance, he gave people a chilling feeling. His skin was fair and tender, and his eyes were like a poisonous snake. Seeing the appearance of the young man, Ichushuan's face changed immediately. He said with fear, "Senior brother Yiteng." It was obvious that Ichushuan was terrified from the bottom of his heart when facing Yiteng. Along with Ichushuan's words, the surrounding disciples also became restless. Yiteng, the leader of the Iron Sword sect. He was ranked third among the 10 direct disciples. They did not expect that even Yiteng would appear. Facing the commotion, Yiteng did not care at all. He looked at Xiaochen indifferently, then at Ichushuan. His eyes flashed with coldness. "Trash, the face of the Iron Sword sect has been thrown away by you." As one of the 10 great direct disciples, Yiteng did not give any face to Ichushuan. However, even so, Ichushuan did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. Instead, he lowered his head and replied in an extremely respectful manner. "Senior brother Yiteng is right. I know my mistake." Both of them were 10 direct disciples, but in front of Yiteng, Ichushuan was like a grandson. He did not dare to show any disrespect. After hearing Ichushuan's words, Yiteng did not say anything else. He casually walked towards Xiaochen in the air. His speed was not fast. Yiteng said as he walked, "Do you think you can compete with the 10 direct disciples just because you fought Ichushuan to a draw? Arrogance without strength will only bring about your own destruction." As he spoke, Yiteng had already arrived in front of Xiaochen. His pair of cold eyes stared at Xiaochen. Facing Yiteng, Xiaochen instinctively felt a great pressure. The person in front of him was on a completely different level from Ichushuan. Of course, what Xiaochen did not know was that Ichushuan was an extremely special existence among the 10 core disciples of Tianfeng Zone. Not only was he ranked last among the 10 core disciples, but Ichushuan's strength was also far inferior to the other direct disciples. It was not an exaggeration to say that Ichushuan was just there to make up the numbers. This was because there were 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Zone, and Ichushuan's strength happened to be in the top 10. Therefore, he became one of the 10 direct disciples. However, in reality, Ichushuan's strength could only be said to be below the top. Ichushuan was indeed stronger than the core disciples, but compared to the other direct disciples, Ichushuan was simply too weak. Not to mention Yiteng, Ichushuan was even inferior to Yu Cheng, who was ranked 9th. Because of this, Ichushuan was extremely embarrassed among the 10 direct disciples. If he was not a member of the Iron Sword sect and had Yiteng's protection, perhaps the other direct disciples would not even acknowledge him. This was a secret among the 10 direct disciples. Therefore, Yiteng did not care that Xiaochen was able to tie with Ichushuan. Yiteng's expression did not change. He slowly pointed his finger and the golden light flashed again. This time, Xiaochen had no way to dodge and could only choose to take it head-on. He also pointed his finger and instantly used the Ganjiang finger sword. He did not hold back at all. The blood-red sword light and the golden finger light collided fiercely and then cancelled each other out. Using the Ganjiang finger sword to successfully block Yiteng's attack, Xiaochen was not happy at all. This was because the Ganjiang finger sword could be said to be his strongest attack right now. However, even so, it could only block a casual attack from Yiteng. He had to use his strongest attack to block a casual attack from Yiteng. From this, one could see the difference in strength between the two of them. At this moment, Xiaochen seemed to have truly witnessed the terror of the 10 direct disciples. They were existences that surpassed the king of geniuses. Yiteng did not care that he could not injure Xiaochen with this attack. Golden light flashed on his finger again and he said indifferently, "Not a bad martial skill. However, I wonder how many times you can use this martial skill. I don't even need to use martial skills to deal with you." With that, another golden finger light shot out from Yiteng's hand. Its power did not decrease at all. Facing Yiteng's attack again, Xiaochen's eyes revealed a trace of bitterness. During the battle with Yichushuman, Xiaochen had used the Ganjiang finger sword repeatedly. Now, he did not have enough spirit force to use the Ganjiang finger sword again. Unable to use the Ganjiang finger sword again, Xiaochen was prepared to use his tempered battle body to take the attack. However, at this moment, a purple finger light flashed and collided with Yiteng's golden finger light. Someone else had come and blocked the attack for Xiaochen. Seeing the purple finger light appear, Yiteng's expression finally changed. He looked at the sky behind Xiaochen. A young man and a young woman had appeared there at some unknown time. Xiaochen recognized the young woman. She was Gu Lingyao's friend, Wang Fang. The young man beside Wang Fang also wore a robe and gave off a faint sense of laziness. However, facing this person, Yiteng's expression was no longer as calm. One could vaguely feel the fear in Yiteng's heart. That's right, Yiteng felt fear in his heart when facing the young man beside Wang Fang. Meeting Yiteng's gaze, the young man beside Wang Fang smiled helplessly. "Junior brother Yiteng, are we just going to let this go? Wang Zong, you want to stop me?" Yiteng said coldly. Wang Zong was the first direct disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. He was known as the #1 genius of Tianfeng Xingzong in 100 years and had the chance to become the sacred son of the ancient sacred sect in the future. In Tianfeng Xingzong, it was no exaggeration to say that Wang Zong was the idol of all the disciples. However, Wang Zong was very low-key and did not appear in front of others often. Therefore, very few people had seen Wang Zong's true face. Facing Wang Zong, Yiteng's heart was filled with fear, hatred, and unwillingness. Hearing Yiteng's cold shout, Wang Zong smiled indifferently. "Junior brother Yiteng, don't misunderstand. I have no intention of fighting with you. However, I just want to remind you that I have already notified the law enforcement hall of what happened here." Chapter 604. Wang Zong was the first pro-disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, but at this moment, he was laughing in a carefree manner. He had no intention of fighting with Yiteng. Instead, he contacted the law enforcement hall. Hearing Wang Zong's words, the corner of Yiteng's mouth twitched unconsciously. He knew that Wang Zong was shameless, but he didn't expect him to be shameless to this extent. Among the top 10 pro-disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong, Wang Zong was definitely an anomaly. Compared to Xiaochen, Wang Zong could be said to be more unrestrained. Of course, Wang Zong's unrestrained behavior was very different from that of Xiaochen's. All in all, Wang Zong's character could be summed up in one sentence. He was extremely shameless and didn't care about his reputation. Moreover, Wang Zong was capable of using any means. Just like now, as the first pro-disciple, Wang Zong's strength was definitely stronger than Yiteng. If Wang Zong fought with Yiteng, Yiteng definitely wouldn't be able to get any benefits. However, because it was troublesome, Wang Zong directly contacted the law enforcement hall. His eyes flashed with deep hatred. Others didn't know that Yiteng had suffered losses in Wang Zong's hands more than once or twice. In Yiteng's opinion, Wang Zong was a scoundrel. He didn't have the consciousness of being the first pro-disciple. However, this guy's talent was extremely heaven-defying and his strength was unfathomable. One shouldn't be afraid of a scoundrel with culture, one should be afraid of a scoundrel with talent. A scoundrel with super high talent would definitely make everyone helpless. Wang Zong was also mindful of Yiteng's angry glare. He said with a smirk, "Junior brother Yiteng, do it. Anyway, the law enforcement hall will be here soon. If you do it now, I definitely won't care." He was sure that Yiteng wouldn't dare to do it. Moreover, Yiteng absolutely wouldn't believe Wang Zong's words. If this guy's words could be trusted, pigs could fly. Not to mention that a gentleman keeps his word, this sentence was useless on Wang Zong. This was because Wang Zong broke his own oath. Therefore, this person's words couldn't be trusted. Yiteng stared coldly at Wang Zong. After a while, he snorted and withdrew his aura. He knew that with Wang Zong around, Xiaochen would not be able to touch him. Just as Yiteng chose to stop, a couple of law enforcement hall deacons appeared in the sky. There were a total of 4 of them. The leader had a cold and stern expression. After sweeping his gaze over everyone present, he asked in a deep voice, "Who reported that there was a life and death duel here?" The law enforcement hall certainly wouldn't care about ordinary private fights. Therefore, when Wang Zong informed the law enforcement hall, he said that there were people fighting here. Once it involved the private life and death duels between disciples, the law enforcement hall could no longer sit back and do nothing. This was the bottom line of the Glory sect. Private fights between disciples were not forbidden, but no one was allowed to die. As soon as the deacon finished speaking, Wang Zong stepped forward with a smile on his face. "It's me." Hearing this, the deacon turned his head to look at Wang Zong. When he saw Wang Zong's face clearly, the deacon was stunned. Then, he revealed a bitter expression. "It's this guy." He was extremely depressed. Of all people, it had to be this weirdo Wang Zong. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he couldn't. After all, Wang Zong's status was right there. Even if the deacon belonged to the law enforcement hall, he couldn't be rude to Wang Zong. He braced himself and bowed to Wang Zong. "Young Master Wang Zong, may I ask who is having a life and death duel here?" "Yes, the third direct disciple, Yiteng, wants to kill the number 1 core disciple, Xiaochen. I already have the intention to kill Yiteng, so I quickly informed the law enforcement hall. You have to treat this matter seriously. After all, Junior Xiaochen is the number 1 core disciple personally appointed by the Sacred Master. If he dies, I don't know what the Sacred Master will do," Wang Zong said seriously. However, when he heard this, Yiteng couldn't hold it in anymore. His eyes were burning with anger as he shouted angrily. "Wang Zong, you're talking nonsense. When did I want to kill Xiaochen?" Indeed, Yiteng didn't say that he wanted to kill Xiaochen. When he heard this, Wang Zong immediately revealed a terrified expression. In a flash, he hid behind the deacon. His speed was so fast that it left people speechless. Only his head was exposed. Wang Zong hid behind the deacon and smiled. "You all saw it. Yiteng threatened me. You all can feel it yourself. Isn't there a murderous intent on Yiteng? This guy has already gone crazy. Not only does he want to kill Junior Xiaochen, he also wants to kill me. Deacons, why aren't you all taking action and taking down this thug? Yiteng wants to kill Wang Zong?" When they heard this, everyone present had a strange expression on their faces. The expression they had when they looked at Wang Zong was extremely interesting. Looking at the terrified Wang Zong, Xiaochen sighed from the bottom of his heart. This guy is really a natural actor. Wang Zong's performance was very vivid. However, everyone knew that even if Yiteng wanted to kill Wang Zong, he didn't dare to do so because he wasn't Wang Zong's match. Wang Zong was obviously much stronger than Yiteng, but he still put on a terrified expression. This Wang Zong was indeed a weirdo. Compared to the helplessness of the crowd, Yiteng's feelings were much simpler. He was furious, absolutely furious. His eyes were fixed on Wang Zong. Yiteng wanted to curse, but he clenched his teeth and acknowledged Wang Zong as his master. Yiteng knew that he couldn't win against Wang Zong, so he chose to remain silent. However, he chose to retreat. However, Wang Zong didn't seem to have enough fun. He looked straight into Yiteng's eyes and continued to shout. Look, isn't the murderous intent in this guy's eyes getting stronger? Damn it, he wants to attack. Deacons, save me. Yiteng couldn't bear it anymore after hearing Wang Zong shout. He shouted with a ferocious expression. Wang Zong, are you done playing? Today's matter is over. Let's go. After shouting, Yiteng didn't want to stay here any longer. He turned around and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, Wang Zong suddenly spoke. Junior brother Yiteng, wait a moment. Yiteng turned around and glared at Wang Zong. Wang Zong didn't care about it and said with a smile. That, junior brother Yiteng, you see, didn't you just threaten me? My little heart is still beating. Before we leave, shouldn't you give me some mental compensation? Extortion. Everyone instantly understood what Wang Zong meant. This guy was not only beaten up by Yiteng, but he also wanted to extort Yiteng. Sure enough, after hearing Wang Zong's words, Yiteng's anger, which had been suppressed with great difficulty, rose once again. However, in the end, he still held it in. He tightly clenched his teeth and said to Wang Zong word by word. How much do you want? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 605. Before leaving, Wang Zong didn't forget to take advantage of Yiteng. Yiteng was obviously experienced. Facing Wang Zong, he was no match for him. He might as well give up his wealth to avoid disaster. Seeing Yiteng being so straightforward, Wang Zong's smile became even brighter. Junior brother Yiteng, how about 50,000? The 50,000 that Wang Zong said was not 50,000 spirit stones, but 50,000 Saint Sect contribution points. It should be known that in the Heavenly Wind Saint Sect, spirit stones did not have much use. Aside from cultivation, there was no other use for them, because everything in the Heavenly Wind Saint Sect depended on Saint Sect contribution points. 50,000 Holy Sect contribution points was definitely a huge sum of money. Even Bai Zhong, who had been the first core disciple for so many years, only had a little more than 10,000 Holy Sect contribution points. However, hearing Wang Zong's words, Yiteng did not hesitate at all. He took out his identity token and transferred 50,000 Holy Sect contribution points to Wang Zong. Then, he left with Yichushuan and the others without saying a word. As expected of a pro-disciple, he didn't even frown at 50,000 Holy Sect contribution points. Seeing Yiteng transfer 50,000 Holy Sect contribution points to Wang Zong without hesitation, Xiaochen secretly sighed. Initially, he had thought that winning 10,000 Glory Sect contribution points was pretty decent already. But when compared to Yiteng and the other direct disciples, it paled in comparison. Indeed, comparisons were odious indeed. After Yiteng and the others left, the deacons of the law enforcement hall also chose to leave. It was as if they were afraid of causing trouble if they stayed with Wang Zong. Everyone left one after another. At this time, Wang Fan came to Wang Zong's side and pouted unhappily. Brother, didn't you say you were going to teach them a lesson? Why did you let them go? Wang Fan was very unhappy that Wang Zong let Yiteng and the others go. Hearing this, Wang Zong smiled and said, it's not good to fight and kill. Also, fighting with Yiteng is too tiring and boring. Too tiring to fight with Yiteng? This was Wang Zong's reason. Wang Fang was completely speechless. She did not say anything more. She came to Xiaochen and asked Xiaochen with a smile. How are you? Are you okay? I'm fine. Thank you. Hearing this, Xiaochen replied with a smile. It's nothing. After all, you are Ling Yao's man. I don't want to see her cry all day. But you are really strong. He Chushuan can't do anything to you. Wang said. To draw with Yichushuan, to draw. Yichushuan. This to draw. To draw. Xiao to draw. After meeting Yitang, Xiaochen was able to feel the difference between Yichushuan and Yichushuan. They were both among the top 10 personal disciples, but they were not at the same level. Just as Xiaochen and Wang Zong were talking, Wang Zong came to Xiaochen with a smile. Facing Wang Zong, Xiaochen bowed and thanked him sincerely. After all, Wang Zong had saved his life today. Facing Xiaochen's gratitude, Wang Zong waved his hand and smiled. "Ha! Junior brother Xiaochen, you don't have to be so polite. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made such a small fortune today. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." After getting 50,000 glory sect contribution points from Yitang, Wang Zong was in a good mood. He left with a face full of greed. Everyone left one after another. Then, Xiaochen asked the disciples of the Tianqi sect to disperse. He, Gu Lingyao, and Wang Fang returned to their residence. Along the way, Xiaochen learned from Wang Fang that Wang Zong was her brother. Not only Xiaochen, but even Gu Lingyao was secretly shocked. Who would have thought that Wang Fang's brother was Wang Zong? With such a background, there was probably no one in Tianfeng Zone who dared to provoke Wang Fang. However, Wang Fang didn't reveal much about her family background. Xiaochen and Gu Lingyao only knew that Wang Zong was Wang Fang's brother. They didn't know anything else. Since Wang Fang wasn't willing to talk about it, Xiaochen and Gu Lingyao naturally wouldn't ask. After experiencing today's events, Xiaochen was also a little tired. After sending the two girls back to their residence, Xiaochen returned alone. Time passed day by day. In the following period of time, whether it was by Zhong or the Iron Sword sect, no one came to find trouble with Xiaochen. This made Xiaochen happy. However, Xiaochen didn't hear anything about the outside world and directly entered the earth-fire cultivation room to cultivate. However, the outside world was in complete chaos. The news of Xiaochen's undefeated battle with Yichushuan that day had already spread throughout Tianfeng Zone. At this time, most of the disciples in Tianfeng Zone knew that Xiaochen, the number one core disciple, was not only stronger than Bai Zhong, but had even entered the ranks of the top 10 core disciples. What was even more exaggerated was that some people had already begun to speculate that perhaps it wouldn't be long before Xiaochen could defeat Yichushuan and become the new top 10 core disciple. Because of Xiaochen's rise, the status of the Tianqi sect's disciples had also risen. After all, if Xiaochen could become one of the top 10 core disciples, then the status of the Tianqi sect would undoubtedly rise. After all, if any sect had a top 10 core disciple, then this sect would become one of the top few sects in Tianfeng Zone. As for the speculations of the outside world, Xiaochen had no idea at all. At this time, he had already spent all his glory sect contribution points on the earth-fire cultivation room. For an entire half a month, Xiaochen had not left the earth-fire cultivation room. Just as Xiaochen was immersed in his cultivation, one day, Xiaochen's earth-fire cultivation room was forcefully interrupted. Feeling the surrounding temperature drop rapidly, Xiaochen slowly opened his eyes, revealing a look of confusion. At the same time, in front of Xiaochen, a white-robed old man with white hair and a youthful complexion appeared before Xiaochen. He had never seen this old man before, but this was the great elder of Tianfeng Zone, He Feng. With a smile on his face, He Feng looked at Xiaochen and said slowly, "Little guy, how about this old man bring you to a treasure ground? It's definitely 100 times better than this place." Not knowing Yi Feng's identity, Xiaochen did not agree immediately after hearing his words. Instead, he asked curiously, "Old man, you are?" Xiaochen was a little confused. Seeing this, He Feng smiled and replied, "My name is He Feng, and I'm the great elder of Tianfeng Zone. How about it? Are you interested in coming with this old man? Your physical body is extraordinary, and if you continue to cultivate in this earth-fire cultivation room, the effects won't be that great anymore. Let me bring you to a place that can help you grow faster. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 606. The Great Elder of Tianfeng Zone. After hearing Yifeng's identity, Xiao Chen's worries were mostly dispelled. After all, as the great elder of Tianfeng Zone, Yifeng had no reason to harm him. The Iron Sword sect, Bai Zhong, and the others also had nothing to do with Yifeng. Besides, even if Yifeng wanted to harm him, he probably wouldn't be able to resist. Even though Xiao Chen couldn't sense Yifeng's exact cultivation, he guessed that Yifeng was a half-saint because all the elders of Tianfeng Zone had to be at least in the half-saint realm. As the great elder, Yifeng's cultivation was probably infinitely close to the saint realm. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Yifeng was one of the strongest people in half of his life. Therefore, such a person naturally had no reason to harm him. After a moment of silence, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. Upon seeing this, Yifeng waved his hand and the two of them mysteriously disappeared on the spot. Then, the door to the cultivation room Xiao Chen was in was opened, and there was no one inside. He didn't know where Yifeng was taking him. After about 100 breaths, Yifeng came to a stop. At the same time, Xiao Chen discovered that there was a wide magma river in front of him, surrounded by black, hard stone walls. The magma river was red and bubbled constantly. At the same time, the temperature in the surroundings was so high that it seemed as though it was going to burn the air. This place. This was the first time Xiao Chen saw a magma river, so he couldn't help but ask. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Yifeng smiled and said, "This is the underground of Tianfeng Sacred Mountain. The magma river in front of you is where Tianfeng Zone's earth vein fire is located." When Tianfeng Zone was founded, the reason why Tianfeng Zone chose Tianfeng Sacred Mountain was because of the earth vein fire flowing underground. That's why Tianfeng Zone established the sect here. The magma river in front of him was the source of the earth vein fire. However, the earth vein fire here wasn't treated in any way. If it weren't for Yifeng, Xiao Chen would have been burned into nothingness. He didn't know why Yifeng brought him here. He couldn't possibly want him to use the earth vein fire to cultivate, right? That was a joke. Even if he was a Dao Emperor, he definitely wouldn't be able to withstand the earth vein fire, not to mention that he was only at the beginning stage of the Dao validation realm. Yifeng didn't expect him to use the earth vein fire to cultivate. However, Yifeng's next words next, Zhao's expression changed face to Zhao's expression. Yifeng took out a talisman from his storage ring and said with a smile, "Don't worry. This talisman is called the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman. It's a saint-grade talisman. Using this talisman can help you withstand the earth vein fire and prevent you from being burned to death. This way, you'll have the chance to refine the earth vein fire. Of course, how long you can last will depend on yourself. How about it? Do you have the courage to cultivate here? You should know that your physical body isn't very useful in the earth vein fire cultivation room. You should know this yourself. Although the earth vein fire is terrifying, it's just right for your current situation. If you can withstand it, I believe it'll be of great help to you." As expected, Yifeng wanted Xiao Chen to use the earth vein fire to cultivate. However, after hearing the effects of the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with joy. There was no need to doubt the benefits of the earth vein fire. The only problem was how to withstand its burning. The Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman had undoubtedly solved this problem. Although Yifeng had already said that it would still hurt, as long as he could withstand the burning of the earth vein fire, the biggest problem would be solved. He asked Xiao Chen if he had the guts to train there. Xiao Chen nodded solemnly after a brief moment of silence, then bowed to Yifeng and thanked him. "Disciple thanks great elder." With such an opportunity in front of him, how could Xiao Chen give it up? Seeing this, Yifeng smiled and handed the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman to Xiao Chen. The Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman can last for half a month. You can cultivate here during this time. If you can't withstand it, crush this voice transmission talisman and I'll rush over to take you away. While handing the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman to Xiao Chen, Yifeng also handed him a voice transmission talisman. His purpose was to prevent Xiao Chen from being unable to withstand it. After all, although the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman could save one's life, it could not withstand the burning pain of the Earth Vein Fire. Therefore, to withstand it for half a month required an extremely strong mental fortitude. In any case, Yifeng did not believe that Xiaochen could withstand it for half a month. After receiving the 2 talismans, Xiaochen thanked Yifeng again and put away the voice transmission talisman. Then, he directly used the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman. For a moment, Xiaochen felt that his entire body was enveloped by a layer of invisible energy. First, he tested the power of the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman. He extended his left and right arms into the lava river. Instantly, a piercing pain caused Xiaochen to grit his teeth. However, in addition to the pain, Xiaochen also realized that although his arms were in pain, they were not affected at all. Sure enough, the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman could really withstand the burning of the Earth Vein Fire. After confirming this, Xiaochen took a deep breath and jumped into the lava river. Seeing Xiaochen jump into the lava river without any hesitation, Yifeng's eyes flashed with surprise. Although the Heaven Flame Sacred Fire Talisman could protect Xiaochen, the pain of the Earth Vein Fire Talisman was real. If it were anyone else, they would definitely not be able to jump into the lava river so easily like Xiaochen. A strange look flashed in his eyes. Yifeng seemed to have understood why Saint Tianfeng valued Xiaochen so much. It seemed that Xiaochen was indeed different from ordinary people. His entire body had already sunk into the lava river. The surrounding Earth Vein Fire seemed to want to burn the earth. Strands of Earth Vein Fire continuously drilled into Xiaochen's body. The intense pain caused Xiaochen to tremble uncontrollably. He had to admit that not many people could withstand the pain of using the Earth Vein Fire to cultivate without any treatment. However, Xiaochen had cultivated the Tempered Battle Body. Back then, when he had cultivated the Tempered Battle Body, the pain was even more unbearable than now. As the saying goes, a person who has truly seen hell will not be afraid when faced with other things. At this moment, Xiaochen was like this. After experiencing the excruciating pain of cultivating the Tempered Battle Body, Xiaochen only frowned slightly in the face of the Earth Vein Fire. He closed his eyes and began to cultivate. In the raging lava river, Xiaochen was like an old monk in meditation. He ignored the burning of the Earth Vein Fire. The spiritual energy in his body continued to circulate and be refined. As time passed, it became purer and purer. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 607. Xiaochen cultivated in the lava river. It had to be said that the effects of cultivating in the lava river were many times better than cultivating in the earth fire cultivation room. In fact, Xiaochen had already felt that the effects of cultivating in the earth fire cultivation room were not that obvious with his current physical body. Furthermore, the speed of his improvement was too slow. Xiaochen was very excited about the opportunity that Yifeng had given him. After observing for a while and seeing that Xiaochen was fine, Yifeng said faintly, "I wonder if this kid can last for half a month." With that, Yifeng left. In an instant, Xiaochen was the only one left in the underground space where the lava river was. After sending Xiaochen into the lava river, Yifeng returned to the peak of Tianfeng Sacred Mountain. In fact, it was the Tianfeng saint who had instructed him to do so. Although the Tianfeng Xingzong had never taken the initiative to summon Xiaochen ever since he had entered the Tianfeng Xingzong, it did not mean that the Tianfeng saint did not pay attention to Xiaochen. On the contrary, the Tianfeng saint knew everything about Xiaochen. The Tianfeng saint knew everything about Xiaochen's defeat of Bai Zhong and the draw with Yichushuan. When Yifeng returned to the peak of Tianfeng Sacred Mountain, the Tianfeng saint, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, asked with a smile, "Is everything done?" "Yes, but is this kid really worthy of the Lord Saint's attention?" Yifeng asked the question that had been bothering him for a long time. Yifeng knew that the Tianfeng saint valued Xiaochen very much. In response to Yifeng's question, the Tianfeng saint slowly opened his eyes and smiled. "I'm just giving him a chance." As for whether he can grasp it or not, it's up to him. Furthermore, don't you think that it's time for the top 10 personal disciples to be changed? My lord, are you talking about Yi Chuxuan? Yi Feng immediately reacted when he heard Tianfeng Saint's words. The Tianfeng Saint was obviously talking about Yi Chuxuan. The Tianfeng Saint was actually not satisfied with Yi Chuxuan becoming one of the top 10 personal disciples. The reason was simple. Yi Chuxuan did not meet the Tianfeng Saint's requirements in terms of talent or strength. The reason why Yi Chuxuan was made one of the top 10 personal disciples was to make up the numbers. Now that Xiaochen had appeared, he was undoubtedly the best candidate to replace Yi Chuxuan. In the eyes of the Tianfeng Saint, there was no such thing as fighting between factions. The requirement to become one of the top 10 personal disciples was not based on one's birth, but on one's ability. Therefore, if there was a better candidate, the Tianfeng Saint would not hesitate to change. Of course, even if he wanted to change, the Tianfeng Saint would not interfere. The only way was for Xiaochen to defeat Yi Chuxuan with his own strength and become one of the top 10 personal disciples. Ever since he entered Tianfeng Zone, the Tianfeng Saint had never given Xiaochen any special treatment. Today's opportunity could be considered a gift from the Tianfeng Zone to Xiaochen in advance to become one of the top 10 personal disciples. Previously, Xiaochen was already on par with Yi Chuxuan. After experiencing the tempering of the earth-fire origin, he would only become stronger. When the time came, it should not be a problem for him to defeat Yi Chuxuan. Seeing that the Tianfeng Saint was silent, Yi Feng did not want to dwell on this issue any longer. He changed the topic and said, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect should be making a move soon. Lord Saint, should I step in? No need. The Iron Sword sect wants to take revenge on Xiaochen. This is their business. Furthermore, if this kid can't even handle this small matter, how can he be a qualified personal disciple? You don't have to worry about this matter. The Tianfeng Saint said. To the Tianfeng Saint, the fight between the factions was just a small matter. It was not worth his attention at all. Hearing this, Yi Feng nodded and left. After Yi Feng left, the Tianfeng Saint looked at the sky and whispered to himself, the fight between the glory sects is about to begin again. The purpose of giving Xiaochen a huge opportunity was to let Xiaochen replace Yi Chuxuan and become one of the top 10 personal disciples. However, Yi Chuxuan was completely unaware of the Tianfeng Saint's intentions. At this moment, Yi Chuxuan stood respectfully in front of Yi Teng in his residence. Yi Teng said calmly, "The glory sect has given me a mission to complete. I will be back in a month at most, 3 months at most. During this time, don't provoke the Tianqi sect. You can't do anything to them in Xiaochen by yourself. Understand?" Understood. Yi Chuxuan nodded respectfully when he heard Yi Teng's words. Yi Teng had to leave because of a mission. Before he left, Yi Chuxuan specially asked him to remind him. After the previous incident, Yi Teng completely understood that Yi Chuxuan, this trash, could not do anything to Xiaochen. Therefore, Yi Chuxuan had better not provoke Xiaochen when he was not in the sect. Otherwise, the Iron Sword sect would lose face. Seeing Yi Chuxuan nod, Yi Teng waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Seeing this, Yi Chuxuan took his leave respectfully. Yi Chuxuan's face was extremely gloomy as he left Yi Teng's residence. What did Yi Teng mean? Was he saying that he was not as good as Xiaochen? Or was he looking down on him? Xiaochen was just a core disciple, while Yi Chuxuan was one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Without Yi Teng's presence, Yi Chuxuan could not provoke Xiaochen. Yi Teng's warning made Yi Chuxuan feel extremely humiliated. Yi Chuxuan did not gain the trust of others when he became one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Yi Chuxuan had always felt that he was inferior to the other pro-disciples. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. After returning to his residence, Yi Chuxuan finally exploded and made a decision that Yi Teng did not expect. Yi Chuxuan stood alone in the courtyard and said with a ferocious expression, "How could I, Yi Chuxuan, be afraid of a mere core disciple? Alright, since you all look down on me and think that I am not worthy of being one of the top 10 pro-disciples, I will show you the consequences of offending me, Xiaochen. This time, I will not give you another chance. He Chushuan was completely enraged by Yiteng's warning. Therefore, He Chushuan decided that this time, he would kill Xiaochen to prove his ability and prove that he was one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Yiteng probably did not expect that his warning before he left not only did not make He Chushuan stop, but also drove him into a frenzy. He Chushuan's subsequent actions caused the Iron Sword sect to lose face. At the same time, He Chushuan also fell into the Tianfeng Saint's trap and was kicked off his pedestal by Xiaochen. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 608. He Chushuan refused to admit that he was inferior to Xiaochen due to his pride as one of the 10 great pro-disciples. Therefore, He Chushuan wanted to prove himself, prove that he was stronger than Xiaochen, prove that he was a true 10 great pro-disciples and not someone who was pulled in to make up the numbers. He Chushuan screamed in his heart. Unfortunately, the miserable He Chushuan didn't know that he had already been kicked out of the 10 great pro-disciples because the Tianfeng Saint had already decided that He Chushuan's position could only be taken by Xiaochen. Originally, the Tianfeng Saint had planned to give Xiaochen such an opportunity this time. After Xiaochen came out of seclusion, he believed that it wouldn't be long before a conflict between the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect would break out. Xiaochen would take advantage of this opportunity to defeat He Chushuan. At that time, the Tianfeng Saint would be able to logically take down He Chushuan and support Xiaochen to become one of the 10 great pro-disciples. However, such a plan was obviously impossible to achieve because He Chushuan, the unlucky guy, was already determined to compete with Xiaochen. Therefore, he would soon walk right into the trap. He Chushuan made up his mind. However, after the previous battle, he was also prepared this time. He ordered someone to go to the sect and use someone else's name to purchase a Frenzy Demon Pill. The Frenzy Demon Pill was a heaven-level upper-grade pill. Its effect was to increase a cultivator's combat power for a short period of time. In order to deal with Xiaochen, He Chushuan didn't hesitate to use the Frenzy Demon Pill. It should be known that the side effects of the Frenzy Demon Pill were extremely obvious. At the Dao Confirmation realm, there were only a handful of medicinal pills that could increase one's combat strength because ordinary medicinal pills could not increase a Dao Confirmation realm cultivator's combat strength at all. However, medicinal pills like the Frenzy Demon Pill were still very effective at the Dao Confirmation realm due to their powerful medicinal effects. However, at the same time, the side effects of the Frenzy Demon Pill were extremely terrifying. This was not just the consequence of being weak for a period of time. It was no exaggeration to say that once a Dao Confirmation realm martial artist swallowed the Berserk Demon Pill, there was a 100% chance that their mind would shatter and they would become an idiot. As for a Dao Confirmation realm martial artist who swallowed it, there was a 30% chance that their mind would shatter. It was precisely because of the terrifying side effects that no one would use the demonic frenzy pill unless it was absolutely necessary. However, He Chushuan, who was already in a frenzy, couldn't care less about this. He Chushuan only had one thought in his mind, and that was to defeat Xiaochen and humiliate him in front of everyone to prove himself. After obtaining the demonic frenzy demon pill, He Chushuan immediately sent people to inquire about Xiaochen's whereabouts. Unfortunately, after some investigation, they didn't know where Xiaochen was. He Chushuan naturally didn't know that Xiaochen had been sent to the underground of the Tianfeng Sacred Middle School by Yifeng. Since he couldn't find Xiaochen, He Chushuan, who was completely crazy, could only find trouble with the other disciples of the Tianqi sect. He Chushuan snorted and said coldly, "Xiaochen, I don't believe that you can hide from me forever. Since you won't come out, I'll force you out." Following He Chushuan's order, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect also began to wantonly find trouble with the disciples of the Tianqi sect. This time, because He Chushuan personally took action and Xiaochen wasn't around, the Tianqi sect naturally couldn't stop them. Almost every day, there were disciples of the Tianqi sect being beaten up. Moreover, this time, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect were even more vicious. Even Zhang Tao, Li Changwang, and the other core disciples of the Tianqi sect were seriously injured one after another. The Iron Sword sect's unbridled revenge shocked the other disciples of the Tianfengxing zone. Everyone could see that the Iron Sword sect was waging an all-out war with the Tianqi sect. On this day, in the ordinary disciple area, dozens of injured disciples of the Tianqi sect were blocked by the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. There were hundreds of disciples of the Iron Sword sect, and the leader was He Chushuan. He Chushuan was wearing a Tianfeng robe. He Chushuan said coldly to the people of the Tianqi sect. "I've said that from now on, I'll beat up the people of the Tianqi sect every time I see them. Looks like you guys don't have a good memory. Or do you think that Shaochen can protect you? Senior brother He Chushuan, don't go overboard. Glory sect won't sit by and watch you do this." Hearing He Chushuan's words, the dozens of disciples of the Tianqi sect had ugly expressions, and one of them shouted. He Chushuan immediately laughed out loud. "Ha, Glory sect? As long as I don't kill you, will Glory sect care? Furthermore, I'm a personal disciple. What can Glory sect do if I kill you, let alone beat you up?" Personal disciples could do whatever they wanted, and that was the truth. Hearing this, the dozens of disciples of the Tianqi sect had ugly expressions. At the same time, He Chushuan immediately gave the order to attack. However, at this moment, an angry roar was heard. "Stop!" Following this angry roar, Gu Lingyao strode out of the crowd and came before He Chushuan, protecting the disciples of the Tianqi sect behind him. His eyes were burning with rage as he glared at He Chushuan. Gu Lingyao had seen He Chushuan's actions in the past few days. However, Shaochen was nowhere to be found. Without Shaochen, the Tianqi sect was like a group of dragons without a leader. They couldn't deal with the crazy revenge of the Iron Sword sect. Seeing that the dozens of disciples of the Tianqi sect were about to be beaten up again, Gu Lingyao naturally stood out without hesitation. It could be said that in the past few days, other than Gu Lingyao, the rest of the disciples of the Tianqi sect had been beaten up by the people of the Iron Sword sect. Of course, Gu Lingyao wasn't affected because of He Chushuan's orders. After all, He Chushuan liked Gu Lingyao. At this moment, seeing Gu Lingyao's appearance, He Chushuan's eyes flashed with a strange look. Then, he revealed a forced smile. "Junior sister Lingyao, I'm not targeting you. This isn't a personal grudge. You have to understand." "Shut up. I don't care about this. If you want to make a move on them, you have to defeat me first." Gu Lingyao didn't listen to He Chushuan's explanation at all and shouted coldly. Gu Lingyao didn't give He Chushuan any face. Seeing this, He Chushuan's eyes flashed with coldness. His admiration for Gu Lingyao was sincere, but Gu Lingyao only had that Shaochen in her heart. Only that Shaochen. He Chushuan's heart burned with anger when he thought of Shaochen. He said coldly, "Junior sister Lingyao, don't force me. You know how I feel about you, but you ignore me. What's so good about Shaochen? Look at this period of time. Has Shaochen ever appeared?" The disciples of the Tianqi sect were beaten up like this, but Shaochen was a coward. "Junior sister Lingyao, is such a man worthy of your love?" He Chushuan didn't know why, but he liked to compare himself to Shaochen now. However, Gu Lingyao's expression turned even colder when she heard this. "Shut up. He Chushuan, do you think you're worthy of being compared to Shaochen? If Shaochen was here, would you still dare to be so unbridled? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 609. He Chushuan's admiration for Gu Lingyao was genuine. However, his sincerity was destined to be unrequited. That was because in Gu Lingyao's heart, there was only Shaochen. He Chushuan had been pursuing Gu Lingyao fiercely ever since she joined Tianfengxing zone. As for Gu Lingyao, she had ignored him at the beginning, but now, she was scolding him angrily. This series of actions had driven He Chushuan completely crazy. He Chushuan's eyes flashed with intense anger as he glared at Gu Lingyao and said coldly, "Gu Lingyao, you forced me to do this. How am I inferior to Shaochen? Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Beat him up. He Chuxuan's heart was filled with anger and jealousy. Gu Lingyao only had Xiaochen in her heart. He Chuxuan had completely given up. However, in his opinion, if he couldn't get the woman, Xiaochen wouldn't be able to get it either. He Chuxuan roared angrily. Hearing this, the hundreds of Iron Sword sect disciples behind him swarmed forward and beat up the Tianqi sect disciples, including Gu Lingyao. He Chuxuan was completely deranged. This time, he didn't even let go of the woman he had always liked. However, facing the attack of the Iron Sword sect disciples, Gu Lingyao naturally wouldn't allow herself to be captured without putting up a fight. However, with He Chuxuan around, Gu Lingyao couldn't do anything alone. Soon, many of the Tianqi sect disciples were knocked to the ground one by one. He Chuxuan even grabbed Gu Lingyao's neck and lifted her up. He Chuxuan looked at Gu Lingyao with an extremely cold gaze and said coldly, "Gu Lingyao, I, He Chuxuan, am one of the top 10 direct disciples. How am I inferior to Xiaochen? Since I can't get you, then don't even think about getting Xiaochen." He Chuxuan forcefully took Gu Lingyao away as he spoke. As for what he wanted to do, it was self-evident. He Chuxuan, who was already in a state of madness, had almost lost his mind. Seeing Gu Lingyao being taken away by force, the dozens of Tianqi sect disciples at the side struggled to stand up. Unfortunately, every time they stood up, the Iron Sword sect disciples would beat them down again. They watched helplessly as Gu Lingyao was taken away by He Chuxuan. At the same time, the Iron Sword sect disciples also left after ruthlessly humiliating the Tianqi sect disciples. Quickly inform senior brother Xiaochen." One of the Tianqi sect disciples, who was already powerless to stand up, said with difficulty. Unaware of what was happening in the outside world, Xiaochen persisted in the Magma River for half a month. On this day, He Feng appeared on the shore of the Magma River as scheduled. Seeing Xiaochen still cultivating in the Magma River, He Feng's eyes flashed with a strange glint. Xiaochen actually managed to hold on for half a month. It was worth noting that the pain of training with the real fire of the Earthline was not something that ordinary people could withstand. However, Xiaochen seemed to be completely fine with it. He Feng seemed to understand why the Tianfeng Saint valued Xiaochen so much. This little guy did indeed have an extraordinary side. However, the things that happened in the past half a month were really exciting. If this little guy came out of seclusion and found out about it, Tianfeng Xingzong would probably be in for another round of excitement. He Feng and the Tianfeng Saint naturally knew about He Chuxuan's actions in the past half a month. However, the Tianfeng Saint didn't intend to pay any attention to it. He even specifically told He Feng that if Xiaochen came out of seclusion, he didn't have to pay any attention to this matter. In fact, as long as it didn't cause any serious consequences, the law enforcement hall didn't have to do anything either. The Tianfeng Saint's words undoubtedly meant that he wanted Xiaochen to deal with this matter himself. It didn't matter even if Xiaochen violated the sect's rules. As long as it didn't cause any serious consequences, the law enforcement hall didn't have to do anything. He Feng exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He was also a little curious about what kind of commotion Xiaochen would cause after he came out of seclusion. As he thought about it, He Feng slowly stretched out his right hand. Then, a strong power of law forcefully separated the Magma River and forcibly pulled Xiaochen out of the Magma River. Half a month had passed and the power of the Heavenly Flame Sacred Fire Talisman was about to run out. Without the protection of the Heavenly Flame Sacred Fire Talisman, Xiaochen would instantly be burned to ashes by the Earth Vein Fire. Thus, whether he was willing or not, Xiaochen's seclusion this time was over. After forcefully pulling Xiaochen out and bringing him to He Feng, Xiaochen slowly opened his eyes. A trace of helplessness flashed through his eyes as he said, "First Elder, is it time?" "It's time. Half a month has passed. You should leave, or the power of the Heavenly Flame Sacred Fire Talisman will disappear." He Feng nodded in response to Xiaochen's words. It was time to leave. Although Xiaochen didn't want to come out of seclusion so soon, he had no choice. Without the Heavenly Flame Sacred Fire Talisman, he wouldn't be able to stay here for long. Moreover, the Heavenly Flame Sacred Fire Talisman was a Saint-tier talisman. He Feng was already very generous to give him one. Xiaochen didn't want to be thick-skinned enough to ask He Feng for another one. After all, the price of a Saint-tier talisman was absolutely shocking. It was at least several dozen times, or even 100 times, more expensive than a heaven-tier talisman. Half a month of seclusion wasn't long, but there were many benefits. First of all, Xiaochen's cultivation base, which he had broken through because of the Wei matrix, had been completely stabilized. Even his own martial arts foundation had been refined under the tempering of the earthline fire. The second was the tempered battle body. Under the refinement of the earth vein fire origin, the tempered battle body had made great progress. Although it still hadn't reached the limit of the first layer, the golden armor realm, it wasn't far from it. In half a month, Xiaochen's cultivation didn't improve at all. However, his strength was incomparable to before. If he were to fight against He Chushuan again, Xiaochen was confident that he could defeat him, and not just tie with him. To have improved so much in half a month, the Tianfeng Saint had indeed given Xiaochen a great opportunity. Of course, Xiaochen didn't know about this. As if he could see the helplessness in Xiaochen's heart, He Feng spoke up. "Alright, when it comes to cultivation, going too far is just as bad as not going far enough. You've already cultivated here for half a month, so it's time for you to take a break. If you continue to cultivate here, not only will it not do you any good, it might even cause a backlash from the earth vein fire. I'll take you to rest for a while, and it's not like you won't have a chance to cultivate here in the future. Let's go." He Feng knew that Xiaochen didn't want to leave, but half a month was already Xiaochen's limit. Without waiting for Xiaochen's reply, He Feng waved his hand, and the two of them immediately disappeared. He Feng brought Xiaochen back to the foot of Tianfeng Xingzong Mountain. After bowing to He Feng, Xiaochen prepared to take his leave. "Thank you, Great Elder. I'll take my leave now. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 610. Xiaochen was filled with gratitude towards He Feng. After all, He Feng had given him such a great opportunity. If it weren't for He Feng, Xiaochen wouldn't have gotten the chance to refine his body with the earthline fire essence. Without the earthline fire essence, Xiaochen wouldn't have improved so much in just half a month. Xiaochen was grateful towards He Feng, so he was extremely respectful towards him. This respect wasn't because of He Feng's status, but because Xiaochen respected him from the bottom of his heart. Seeing Xiaochen's respectful attitude towards him, He Feng smiled slightly. His impression of Xiaochen improved once again. Knowing how to repay kindness, this kid had a good character. He Feng smiled and nodded. "Go on. Remember, don't go to the earthline fire cultivation room for the time being. You've absorbed enough earthline fire. You need some time to refine and absorb it before you can continue to use the earthline fire to cultivate." "Yes." Hearing He Feng's words, Xiaochen nodded. Even if He Feng didn't mention it, Xiaochen wouldn't go to the earthline fire cultivation room. After coming in contact with the earthline fire essence, the earthline fire cultivation room was no longer attractive to Xiaochen. Xiaochen turned around to leave as soon as he finished speaking. However, He Feng seemed to have recalled something at that moment. He called out to Xiaochen mysteriously. "Xiaochen, remember this. You can't break the rules of the sect, and you can't kill anyone in Glory Sect. Got it?" He Feng said mysteriously. Xiaochen didn't know what He Feng meant, but he still nodded. He Feng's eyes flashed with worry as he watched Xiaochen leave. Now that the ferocious tiger had come out of seclusion, he wondered how Xiaochen would deal with the vengeance of the Iron Sword clan over the past 2 weeks. He Feng's reminder was to remind Xiaochen that he could cause a ruckus in Glory Sect, but he could never kill anyone, especially someone like He Chushuan, who was one of the top 10 personal disciples. Xiaochen didn't know what He Feng meant by his last sentence, but he soon understood. On their way back to Tianfeng Xingzong, they first passed by the area for ordinary disciples. However, when Xiaochen appeared, the surrounding disciples all looked at him strangely. Noticing the abnormality of many disciples, the disciples of the Tianqi sect also rushed over after receiving the news of Xiao Chen's appearance. The first to arrive were 3 ordinary disciples from the Celestial Equal sect. All 3 of them were injured. When they saw Xiao Chen, they hurried over and spoke with an anxious expression. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, hurry! Go to Yichushuan. He has taken senior sister Gu away." Xiao Chen came out of seclusion only half an hour after Gu Lingyao was taken away. Therefore, if Xiao Chen rushed over to Yichushuan, he should still be able to make it. Hearing the words of the 3 disciples, Xiao Chen still didn't know what had happened. He asked curiously, "What's wrong? Also, what's with the injuries on your bodies?" After half a month of seclusion, Xiao Chen naturally didn't know anything about the outside world. Hearing this, the 3 disciples couldn't be bothered to explain too much. After all, Gu Lingyao was still in Yichushuan's hands. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, there's no time. Hurry and save senior sister Gu. Yichushuan has taken her away. If you're late, it's all over." Even a fool would know why Yichushuan took Gu Lingyao away. Since he couldn't have her, then Xiao Chen shouldn't either. Yichushuan said this himself. Yichushuan, who had fallen into madness, obviously wanted to take over Gu Lingyao's body. Seeing that the 3 of them were in such a hurry, Xiao Chen seemed to have guessed something in his heart. A surge of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. He did not ask any more questions and disappeared from the spot in a flash. He didn't know what had happened during his seclusion for half a month, but the most important thing now was to save Gu Lingyao. "Yichushuan, you better pray that he didn't do anything to Lingyao. Otherwise, no one will be able to save you today." Along the way, Xiao Chen's heart was filled with killing intent. Just as Xiao Chen was rushing towards Yichushuan's residence, Yichushuan forcefully dragged Gu Lingyao back. At this moment, in Yichushuan's room, Gu Lingyao's cultivation had already been sealed by Yichushuan. Facing the ferocious look on Yichushuan's face, Gu Lingyao continuously retreated and shouted coldly. "Yichushuan, what are you trying to do? You're one of the top 10 direct disciples. Aren't you afraid of being despised by the other disciples of Glory Sect?" "Despise? Ah, so what? Gu Lingyao, ever since you entered Tianfengsheng Zone, I, Yichushuan, have spent a lot of effort on you. But you chose Xiao Chen, that trash. Let me ask you, in what way am I inferior to Xiao Chen? Since you don't know what's good for you, then I can only resort to unscrupulous means. Even if I can't get your heart, I can get your body." Yichushuan took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Gu Lingyao. With her cultivation sealed, Gu Lingyao could not resist at all in front of Yichushuan. Without any effort, Yichushuan lifted Gu Lingyao up by the waist and strode towards the bed. "Yichushuan, you beast. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way." Gu Lingyao struggled continuously. But how could she break free from Yichushuan's arms? In a few steps, he arrived at the bed and threw Gu Lingyao onto the bed. Then, Yichushuan pressed his entire body on top of her. Yichushuan's right hand gently brushed Gu Lingyao's cheek. His eyes flashed with greed as he said, "You want to die? How can I bear to do that? Junior sister Lingyao, look at you. You're so beautiful. How can I, Yichushuan, bear to let such a beauty die? You're shameless." Gu Lingyao scolded. "Ha, that's right. I'm shameless. So what? Junior sister Lingyao, do you know that ever since I first saw you, I've been thinking about the first time we had sex? Today, I can finally get what I want. I'm really looking forward to seeing Xiao Chen's expression when he finds out that I've taken you by force." "Ha!" Yichushuan laughed out loud. He could finally have Gu Lingyao. Although it was only her body, Yichushuan was extremely excited. This was a woman he had been dreaming of. Today, he could finally get close to her. Yichushuan was about to lean over and kiss Gu Lingyao. Seeing this, Gu Lingyao kept struggling. She cursed angrily, "Let go of me. Let go of me." Her heart was filled with despair. For a woman like Gu Lingyao, she would rather die than let Yichushuan have his way. But at this moment, He Chushuan's door was smashed by an unknown object with a bang. Then, an extremely cold voice came from outside the door. He Chushuan, I'm afraid you won't get what you want today. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 611. The voice sounded like it came from hell, giving people a bone-chilling feeling. Along with this sudden change, He Chushuan's movements also stopped. He turned his head to look at the door, only to see a core disciple who had already been beaten to a pulp lying there. He Chushuan knew this person. He was a core disciple of the Iron Sword sect. He Chushuan had asked him to stay far away from his room, and no one was allowed to enter. But now, this person was beaten to the point that he was on the verge of death. He Chushuan's eyes flashed with surprise. Then, he looked outside the door again. At the same time, Xiao Chen stepped into the room. Xiao Chen's anger had reached its peak as he rushed over. But now, He Chushuan was on top of Gu Lingyao, and Gu Lingyao's tear-stained face. Xiao Chen's killing intent instantly exploded. It was hard to imagine what would have happened if he had arrived just a little later. The killing intent in his eyes seemed to have materialized, and like two sharp swords, they pierced towards He Chushuan. He Chushuan was stunned when he saw that the person who came was Xiao Chen. But soon, he burst out laughing. Ha, Xiao Chen, you coward, are you finally willing to show yourself? But it's over. Gu Lingyao is now my woman. How is it? Are you unhappy to see your woman being pressed down by me? Ha. He Chushuan was surprised by Xiao Chen's appearance. But after thinking about it, he felt extremely happy. At this moment, Gu Lingyao was being pressed down by him. Although they had not done anything, He Chushuan felt the pleasure of successfully taking revenge. In the face of He Chushuan's laughter, Xiao Chen did not reply. He took a step forward and activated his tempered battle body. His body shone with golden light, and he instantly appeared in front of He Chushuan. He Chushuan reached out to grab Gu Lingyao. Seeing this, He Chushuan naturally did not agree. He wanted to stop him, but Xiao Chen was already prepared. He shouted angrily, and at the same time, threw out a punch, which collided with He Chushuan's right palm. Get lost. His shout was like thunder. Following Xiao Chen's angry shout, He Chushuan was directly pushed back. At the same time, Xiao Chen took the opportunity to grab Gu Lingyao's wrist and pulled Gu Lingyao into his arms. After successfully rescuing Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen's anger did not diminish at all. It was undeniable that the scene just now had completely provoked Xiao Chen. It had also completely touched Xiao Chen's bottom line. He stared coldly at He Chushuan, who was pushed back by his punch. On the other side, Gu Lingyao, who was already protected by Xiao Chen, was not happy at all. Instead, she was filled with worry. Gu Lingyao's worry was very simple. She was afraid that Xiao Chen would misunderstand her and think that she had been sullied by He Chushuan. She knew Xiao Chen very well. For a person as proud as Xiao Chen, although she was confident that Xiao Chen would not blame her for being sullied by a woman, it was undeniable that there would be a thorn between the two of them from now on. Gu Lingyao did not want that to happen. Therefore, after hesitating for a while, Gu Lingyao gently tugged at Xiao Chen's sleeve. She stubbornly looked up at Xiao Chen with an aggrieved expression and said, Xiao Chen, I have not been sullied by him. Otherwise, I would definitely not drag out an ignoble existence. Gu Lingyao wanted to prove that she was still innocent. Hearing this, Xiao Chen turned to look at her. The little girl stubbornly wanted to prove herself. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled and gently patted Gu Lingyao's little head. What are you talking about, silly girl? Don't let your imagination run wild. Watch carefully. I will avenge you right now. Gu Lingyao was obviously overthinking things. Of course, her actions also warmed Xiao Chen's heart. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen turned to look at He Chushuan again and said coldly, Tell me, how do you want to die? Gu Lingyao was Xiao Chen's reverse scale. He Chushuan had touched this reverse scale, so he had to die. What bullshit sect rules? Xiaochen did not want to care anymore. Hearing Xiaochen's words, He Chushuan's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He said, "I want you to die." He Chushuan took the initiative to attack and threw a punch at Xiaochen. Seeing this, Xiaochen gently pushed Gu Lingyao out of the room and landed safely in the courtyard. At the same time, Xiaochen did not dodge. Instead, he threw a punch at He Chushuan's fist. Half a month ago, Xiaochen might not have been able to do much to He Chushuan. However, He Chushuan was no longer a match for him now. His heart was filled with murderous intent. Naturally, he would not show any mercy when he attacked. With a muffled bang, the two fists collided. This time, He Chushuan was still at a disadvantage and was forced to retreat once again. After gaining the upper hand with one blow, Xiaochen did not show any mercy. He leaped forward and launched a fierce attack. The two of them fought fiercely in the room. The terrifying aftermath of the battle almost destroyed the house in an instant. The house collapsed with a loud bang. From the ruins, two figures shot up to the sky. It was Xiaochen and He Chushuan. The two of them fought fiercely all the way to the sky. However, He Chushuan soon showed signs of defeat in front of the powerful refined battle god. Facing He Chushuan's attacks, Xiaochen could not ignore them. He Chushuan's attacks could not cause any substantial damage to Xiaochen in the face of absolute physical suppression. On the other hand, He Chushuan's eyebrows twitched every time Xiaochen attacked. How is this possible? It's only been half a month. How can his strength be so strong? He Chushuan was more and more shocked as he fought. Half a month ago, he had fought Xiaochen. At that time, although Xiaochen was strong, he could only fight to a draw with him. He was even slightly weaker than him. In just half a month, Xiaochen's strength had improved so much. He Chushuan could not even block Xiaochen's attacks, let alone take advantage of him. Sure enough, after more than 100 moves, Xiaochen seized an opportunity and punched He Chushuan's chest. He Chushuan was blasted to the ground like a cannonball. With a loud bang, dust flew into the air. He Chushuan was smashed into the ground, creating a huge pit. He lay in the pit and spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura had also become weak in an instant. Seeing how Xiaochen defeated He Chushuan so easily, Gu Lingyao covered her mouth in shock. After disappearing for half a month, Xiaochen's strength had increased by a lot. Standing in the air and looking down at He Chushuan, Xiaochen's face was still cold and murderous. He said, "Tell me, how do you want to die?" It was extremely domineering. However, Xiaochen now had the strength to be domineering. So what if he was one of the top 10 personal disciples? He was still blasted to the ground by Xiaochen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 612. Upon hearing Xiaochen's words, He Chushuan, who had been blasted into the deep pit below, struggled to stand up. He raised his head and stared coldly at Xiaochen in the sky. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, but in addition, there was also unwillingness and fear. Xiaochen's strength had completely exceeded He Chushuan's imagination. Originally, when facing Xiaochen, even if He Chushuan couldn't win, he could still win. But now, facts had proven that Xiaochen already had the power to defeat He Chushuan after half a month. It had only been half a month. How could Xiaochen's strength have improved so much? Also, where did he go in the past half a month? He was very unwilling, but he had to admit that he was no longer Xiaochen's opponent after half a month. Xiaochen said coldly as they looked at each other coldly. "You don't want to say? Forget it. You're going to die anyway." After saying that, Xiaochen prepared to attack. No matter what, He Chushuan had to die today. However, just as Xiaochen was about to kill He Chushuan, a voice came from the sky. "Xiaochen, don't you think you've gone too far? This is the area of the top 10 personal disciples. You're making trouble here. You're looking down on us." Along with the voice, two personal disciples in Tianfeng robes appeared in front of Xiaochen. One of them was Yu Cheng, who was ranked 9th among the top 10 personal disciples. Beside Yu Cheng stood a solemn-looking, old-fashioned young man who never smiled. His name was Lian Su, and he was ranked 8th among the top 10 personal disciples. Yu Cheng and Lian Su happened to be in Tianfeng Zone today and didn't go out. When they felt the aftermath of He Chushuan's battle, they quickly rushed over. But they didn't expect the battle to be between Xiaochen and He Chushuan. And judging from the outcome, He Chushuan was obviously defeated. He Chushuan was defeated in such a short time. Yu Cheng and Lian Su were rather surprised. While stopping Xiaochen, Lian Su glanced at He Chushuan below with unconcealable astonishment in his eyes. Facing Yu Cheng and Lian Su who suddenly appeared to stop him, Xiaochen couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with them. "Are you trying to stop me?" There wasn't the slightest surprise in his tone. Facing one of the top 10 personal disciples, Xiaochen's attitude was still as cold as ever. Yu Cheng was displeased. Although he looked down on He Chushuan was still one of the 10 personal disciples. Now that he had been beaten up by Xiaochen, it was a disgrace to the 10 personal disciples. Furthermore, Xiaochen's attitude towards him was. Yu Cheng let out a snort. "Humph. So what if I'm stopping you?" "Xiaochen, be clear of your identity. You're only a core disciple. Besides, this is the personal disciple area. You can't mess around here." Yu Cheng and Xiaochen didn't have any grudges. In fact, from a certain perspective, Yu Cheng admired Xiaochen. But it was a pity that Xiaochen didn't care about the reputation of one of the top 10 personal disciples at all and wasn't respectful at all. This infuriated Yu Cheng, which was why when he spoke, his tone sounded a little harsh. For Yu Cheng, the top 10 personal disciples were his pride, and Xiaochen's disregard of the top 10 personal disciples was undoubtedly trampling on his pride. Upon hearing Yu Cheng's words, Xiaochen remained expressionless. The storage ring in his hand flickered and the ink dragon sword appeared in his hand. "So what if I mess around? No matter who it is, anyone who stops me is an enemy. He Chushuan's head will be mine today." Xiaochen's attitude towards Yu Cheng and Lian Su was unusually tough. Yu Cheng's expression darkened. "You can try." As they spoke, the two of them were ready to fight. However, Lian Su stepped in between them and gave Yu Cheng a look, indicating for him to calm down. Then, he looked at Xiaochen and asked, "What do you think?" "Junior brother Xiaochen, no matter what happened between you and He Chushuan, this is the personal disciple area after all. You've crossed the line by killing someone here. Besides, Glory Sect has a rule that disciples are not allowed to fight to the death in private except in the Battle Gate Pavilion. Glory Sect will definitely punish you for this. Now that He Chushuan has been defeated by you, let's end this matter here. If you're still not satisfied, you can apply for a death match at the Battle Gate Pavilion. When the time comes, you and He Chushuan can fight to the death on the death match platform. We won't stop you." Lian Su stood out and advised. Although it was his first time meeting Xiaochen, Lian Su did not put on airs as a personal disciple because Xiaochen had defeated He Chushuan. If nothing unexpected happened, Xiaochen would soon replace He Chushuan as the 10th personal disciple. At that time, Xiaochen would be the same as them, a personal disciple of Tianfeng Zone. Therefore, when persuading Xiaochen, Lian Su completely treated him as a personal disciple of equal status. However, Lian Su did not know what had happened and wanted to persuade Xiaochen to stop. He was probably thinking too much. A dragon had a reverse scale, and He Chushuan had already touched Xiaochen's reverse scale. Xiaochen's killing intent did not diminish. He looked at Lian Su and said coldly, "Satisfied? Senior brother, you don't know what He Chushuan has done, so you don't need to persuade me anymore. If I don't personally cut off his dog head today, I won't stop. It's the same no matter who comes. I'll still say the same thing. Whoever stops me is my enemy. Let He Chushuan go just like that? Fight to the death on the deathmatch platform? What a joke. Not to mention whether Xiaochen would agree or not, Xiaochen could apply for a death match at the deathmatch platform at the Battle Gate Pavilion, but He Chushuan also had the right to refuse. After today's incident, as long as He Chushuan was not stupid, he would definitely not agree to a death match with Lien Su. In that case, how could Lien Su kill him on the deathmatch platform? Because of this, it was better to cut the crap. No matter who came today, as long as they tried to stop Lien Su, they would be his enemy. Xiao Chen's words stunned Lien Su. He was too arrogant. Xiao Chen's words meant that he would not give face to any of the top 10 personal disciples. Was he trying to make an enemy out of the top 10 personal disciples? Lien Su also felt that Xiao Chen was a little too arrogant. On the other side, Yu Cheng exploded. An aura shot up from his body as he shouted angrily. Lien Su, get out of the way. This guy is too arrogant. Today, I'd like to see how you're going to kill Yi Chuxuan with me, Yu Cheng, here. Having said that, Yu Cheng chose to attack. The storage ring on his hand flashed and a long staff appeared in his hand. It was Yu Cheng's weapon. Yu Cheng took out his supreme-grade heavenly weapon and slammed the staff down. Seeing this, Xiao Chen did not dodge. He slashed out with his sword and used the triple overlapping waves. The two of them collided in the air. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 613. The glow of the staff and the shadow of the sword clashed violently with a muffled boom. To everyone's surprise, Xiao Chen was the one who was at a disadvantage in that clash. He was knocked back 8 steps. Yu Cheng suppressed Xiao Chen with a single strike. However, he wasn't happy at all. Instead, he was incomparably astonished. This guy's strength. Yu Cheng thought to himself. Yu Cheng was well aware of his own strength. It was important to note that Yu Cheng did not hold back when he attacked out of anger. Even so, Xiao Chen was able to block his attack, which was a bit too unbelievable. Not only Yu Cheng, but Lien Su also wore an odd expression. Both of them had underestimated Xiao Chen's strength. Compared to Yu Cheng's astonishment, Xiao Chen wasn't any less astonished than him. Yu Cheng is ranked 9th among the top 10 personal disciples while Yi Chuxuan is ranked 10th. They are only 1 rank apart, but the difference in strength is so huge, Xiao Chen thought to himself. What surprised him was the difference in strength between Yu Cheng and Yi Chuxuan. It could be said that the difference of 1 rank was like heaven and earth. It wouldn't be difficult for Xiao Chen to defeat or even kill Yi Chuxuan. At most, it would be troublesome and strenuous. However, in the face of Yu Cheng, who was only 1 rank higher than Yi Chuxuan, Xiao Chen was at a disadvantage. If it weren't for his strong physical body, perhaps he would have been injured in that clash. Unlike Yi Chuxuan, who was just a filler, Yu Cheng wasn't. Therefore, even though they were only 1 rank apart, Yu Cheng's strength completely crushed Yi Chuxuan's. After this clash, Xiao Chen and Yu Cheng were astonished to varying degrees. However, Xiao Chen didn't choose to stop. Yu Cheng's strength was indeed beyond his imagination, but it was impossible for Xiao Chen to stop now. No matter what, he had to kill Yi Chuxuan today. This dog must die today. This was Xiao Chen's bottom line. At this thought, the coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes intensified. He cast the stampede of the tiger and pushed his tempered battle body to the limit. His body erupted in a golden radiance. Xiao Chen took a step forward and dashed toward Yi Chuxuan instead of Yu Cheng. His target wasn't Yu Cheng. Moreover, after the clash, Xiao Chen knew that he was still weaker than Yu Cheng. It was almost impossible for him to defeat Yu Cheng and then kill Yi Chuxuan. Moreover, even if he succeeded, there was still Lien Su, who was stronger than Yu Cheng. Therefore, this method wouldn't work. In that case, he might as well bypass Yu Cheng and kill Yi Chuxuan directly. No matter what Yu Cheng was doing, Xiao Chen was determined to kill Yi Chuxuan. As long as he seized some small mistakes or gaps in Yu Cheng's attack, Xiao Chen would have a chance to kill Yi Chuxuan. Seeing that Xiao Chen chose to ignore him and rush toward Yi Chuxuan, Yu Cheng recovered from his shock. Without hesitation, he chased after Xiao Chen. The two of them rushed toward Yi Chuxuan one after another. Seeing this, Yi Chuxuan seemed to be scared out of his wits and stood still. Seeing that Yi Chuxuan didn't even know how to dodge, Yu Cheng, who who was chasing after Xiaochen, was furious. He cursed this idiot in his heart and shouted angrily. He Chuxuan, are you stupid? Why aren't you running? This guy was really an idiot. His opponent was already here and he was still standing there like a fool. Did he want to stretch his neck out for his opponent to chop off? He Chuxuan recovered from his shock after being yelled at by Yu Cheng. He immediately turned around and prepared to run away. However, his speed was obviously not as fast as Xiao Chen's. Like a fierce tiger, before Yi Chuxuan could run far, Xiaochen had already caught up with him. Then, he stabbed with his sword and performed the square heaven sword shadow. The sword shadows pierced Yi Chuxuan's vital parts. For a moment, Yi Chuxuan felt his hair stand on end. Using all his strength, he finally managed to avoid being hit in his vital parts. However, his waist was still pierced by Xiao Chen's sword. Blood spurted out, but he managed to avoid being hit in his vital parts. Seeing that he didn't kill Yi Chuxuan with one strike, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed coldly. While Xiao Chen was attacking Yi Chuxuan, Yu Cheng successfully caught up with Xiao Chen. After kicking Yi Chuxuan away, Yu Cheng stood in front of Xiao Chen and shouted, "Don't be a hindrance. Get lost if you don't want to die." Yu Cheng's original intention was to stop Xiao Chen from protecting Yi Chuxuan. However, Yi Chuxuan was greatly humiliated by Yu Cheng's words. Yu Cheng actually thought that he was a hindrance. This was also the truth. Xiao Chen, who had changed his plan, no longer chose to fight to the death with Yu Cheng. Instead, he planned to bypass Yu Cheng and kill Yi Chuxuan. As a result, Yu Cheng was instantly under a lot of pressure. Because in terms of speed, Yu Cheng was actually not much faster than Xiao Chen. Therefore, to successfully stop Xiao Chen, Yu Cheng was under a lot of pressure. If he wasn't careful, Xiao Chen might succeed. Therefore, Yu Cheng wanted Yi Chuxuan to get lost quickly. After all, as long as Yi Chuxuan escaped, Xiao Chen wouldn't have a target to kill. As a result, the battle would naturally end. Knowing what Yu Cheng was thinking, Xiao Chen was a little depressed that he didn't kill Yi Chuxuan with one strike. However, after thinking about it, no matter how weak Yi Chuxuan was, he was still one of the top 10 personal disciples. His strength was much stronger than Yi Chuxuan's. Although Xiao Chen's strength was no longer the same as before, it was still somewhat difficult for him to kill Yi Chuxuan in one move. If the first time didn't work, he would try a second time. Xiao Chen wanted to rush past Yu Cheng. Seeing this, Yu Cheng swung his staff and shouted angrily. "Xiao Chen, that's enough." No matter what, Yi Chuxuan is still one of the top 10 personal disciples. How long are you going to make trouble for? I'll naturally stop after I kill him. Also, how can a piece of trash like this be worthy of being one of the top 10 personal disciples? What a joke, Xiao Chen replied coldly when he heard Yu Cheng's words. Then, he swung his sword and collided fiercely with Yu Cheng's staff. The powerful force once again sent Xiao Chen flying. However, with the help of Yu Cheng's strength, Xiao Chen actually turned his spear and rushed toward Yi Chuxuan. Yi Chuxuan, who was originally running away, was protected by Yu Cheng. However, for some reason, this idiot chose to escape from the left. This was exactly what Xiao Chen wanted. Using Yu Cheng's strength, Xiao Chen rushed toward Yi Chuxuan like lightning. Seeing Yi Chuxuan appear on his left, Yu Cheng's face darkened. He cursed in his heart, "What an idiot. Doesn't he know how to run?" Yi Chuxuan didn't even know how to run. Although he cursed in his heart, Yu Cheng still quickly chased after Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 614. Yi Chuxuan, one after the other, rushed towards him. Yi Chuxuan, who was running away, suddenly felt a strong murderous intent rushing towards him. He turned his head and saw Xiao Chen again. There was a hint of fear in his eyes, and at the same time, hatred. He no longer had the courage to fight Xiao Chen head-on. Facing Xiao Chen, who was rushing towards him, Yi Chuxuan's eyes unconsciously fell on Gu Lingyao, who was not far away. He suddenly had a plan. In terms of strength, he was no longer Xiao Chen's match. In that case, he might as well take down Gu Lingyao directly. With Gu Lingyao in his hands, would Xiao Chen still dare to attack him? He Chuxuan was very satisfied with his plan. He used Gu Lingyao to make Xiao Chen hesitate. He Chuxuan also changed his direction and went straight for Gu Lingyao. He thought his plan was flawless, but when he saw He Chuxuan's actions, a cold smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face. He whispered to himself, "I knew you would never change your habit. This idiot." Xiao Chen had already expected that He Chuxuan would use Gu Lingyao to threaten him. Seeing this, Xiao Chen, who was chasing after Xiao Chen, also scolded him angrily. Why would Yu Chen scold He Chuxuan? Because before He Chuxuan made a move, Xiao Chen had already quietly approached Gu Lingyao. At this time, He Chuxuan went straight for Gu Lingyao. To put it bluntly, he had fallen into Xiao Chen's trap. Based on the distance between Xiao Chen and He Chuxuan and Gu Lingyao, it was obvious that Xiao Chen was closer. In addition, Xiao Chen's speed was faster than He Chuxuan's. Therefore, before He Chuxuan could reach Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen could already block him halfway. It could be said that by doing this, He Chuxuan had completely rushed into Xiao Chen's arms and allowed Xiao Chen to kill him. He Chuxuan thought he was smart, but he never realized that he was actually this stupid. It was already very difficult for Yu Chen to restrain Xiao Chen with all his strength. If Xiao Chen didn't want to fight to the death with Yu Chen, he couldn't do much about it. He Chuxuan had created several opportunities to escape with great difficulty, but this idiot thought that he was infallible and wasted them time and time again. The murderous intent in his eyes had reached its peak. He Chuxuan didn't realize what was going on until Xiao Chen stood in front of him. He was about to turn around and run away, but it was too late. Without stopping, Xiao Chen pointed his finger at Yu Chen behind him and instantly executed the Tai sword finger. Yu Chen didn't dare to be careless in the face of Xiao Chen's attack and chose to defend himself. After delaying Yu Chen's arrival, Xiao Chen pointed his finger at He Chuxuan and executed the Ganjiang sword finger. A blood-red sword ray flashed and unsurprisingly, it directly penetrated He Chuxuan's forehead. He Chuxuan died on the spot. Xiao Chen still managed to kill He Chuxuan despite Yu Chen's obstruction. After successfully blocking the Tai sword finger, Yu Chen stood not far behind Xiao Chen and looked at He Chuxuan, who fell straight to the ground. His face turned pale and he clenched his teeth tightly. After a while, he came back to his senses and shouted angrily. "Xiao Chen, you actually dared to kill one of the top 10 pro-disciples. You're in big trouble." Yu Chen's voice was filled with shock and anger. He was shocked because Xiao Chen actually dared to kill He Chuxuan without hesitation. He was angry because Xiao Chen killed He Chuxuan right under his nose. He made a move but failed to save He Chuxuan's life in the end. Facing Yu Chen's angry shout, Xiao Chen turned his head and looked at him calmly. "I said that this thing is worse than a dog. He's not qualified to be one of the top 10 pro-disciples." After killing He Chuxuan, much of Xiao Chen's hostility had dissipated. Hearing this, Yu Chen was exasperated. He snorted coldly. Since things had come to this, there was no point in saying anything more. However, after this battle with Xiao Chen, Yu Chen finally understood that Xiao Chen's strength wasn't simple. Although he wasn't as strong as himself, he wasn't far behind. Xiao Chen already had the strength of a pro-disciple. Yu Chen looked at Xiao Chen with mixed feelings. When the two of them looked at each other, Lian Su came to Yu Chen's side and glanced at He Chuxuan's corpse. Lian Su wasn't sad about his death at all. He had always looked down on He Chuxuan. However, He Chuxuan was killed right in front of him. Moreover, he was still one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Lian Su's feelings were still a little complicated. Lian Su sighed and turned to look at Xiao Chen. There was no trace of hostility in his voice. "Xiao Chen, do you know that you're in big trouble?" "So what?" Xiao Chen replied nonchalantly after hearing Lian Su's words. "Sai, you killed He Chuxuan in private. The law enforcement hall definitely won't let you off easily. Even if the law enforcement hall doesn't make things difficult for you, don't forget that He Chuxuan is a disciple of the Iron Sword sect and one of the 2 pro-disciples. Since you killed him, the Iron Sword sect won't rest until you're dead. Moreover, he Chushun still has Yitang. He won't let you off easily, said Lian Su. Xiaochen said indifferently. Won't rest until I'm dead? I'm afraid it's not the Iron Sword sect that won't rest until I'm dead. It's my Tianqi sect that won't rest until I'm dead. From today onwards, as long as I, Xiaochen, am alive, the Iron Sword sect won't have a good life. How could Xiaochen not know about the trouble that Lian Su mentioned? However, this wasn't a reason for Xiaochen to let He Chushun go. He Chushun was already a dead man the moment he took Gu Lingyao away by force. As Xiaochen finished speaking, Gu Lingyao rushed into Xiaochen's arms and hugged Xiaochen's waist tightly. Facing Gu Lingyao, Xiaochen's killing intent and coldness instantly dissipated. A gentle smile appeared on his face. All right, it's fine now. He was like a completely different person compared to before. Just as Xiaochen's physical body was comforting Gu Lingyao, Wang Fang and Wang Zong also arrived. They saw Gu Lingyao and Xiaochen at a glance. Wang Fang directly went to the two of them and looked at the weeping Gu Lingyao. Wang Fang said fiercely, He Chushun is a beast. Lingyao, don't be afraid. I'll take care of him now. Where is he? I'll get Big Brother to break his limbs. Hearing Wang Fang's words, Xiaochen smiled. I'm afraid there's no need for that. Why? Xiaochen, you can't be saying that you'll let him go, right? Are you still a man? He already treated Lingyao like this and you still want to let him go? Lingyao is your woman. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Wang Fang thought that Xiaochen intended to let him go because of He Chushun's identity. Facing Wang Fang's scolding, Xiaochen helplessly pointed to a spot not far away. Looking in the direction that Xiaochen pointed, Wang Fang's expression changed drastically because she saw He Chushun's corpse. You killed him? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 615. At first, Wang Fang thought that Xiaochen was going to let He Chushun go because of his identity. However, in the next second, she saw He Chushun's corpse. Her expression was blank as she exclaimed in disbelief. Wang Fang had never thought of killing He Chushun. After all, He Chushun was one of the top 10 personal disciples. Glory sect would not let the matter rest if he was killed. She had only wanted Wang Zong to teach He Chushun a lesson. However, who would have thought that Xiaochen would kill him? Wang Fang was shocked. At the same time, Wang Zong had come to Xiaochen's side unknowingly. Looking at He Chushun's corpse, Wang Zong was not too surprised. On the contrary, he teased Xiaochen with a smile. TSK, junior brother Xiaochen is really a new person. You actually killed He Chushun with your own hands. Looks like the position of the 10th personal disciple is yours. Wang Zong was still in the mood to joke. Wang Fang snapped out of her daze and said unhappily, how can you still be in the mood to joke at a time like this? Xiaochen killed He Chushun. The people from the law enforcement hall will not let this matter rest. Xiaochen was already in big trouble. Forget about the position of the 10th personal disciple. He should think about how to deal with the law enforcement hall first. In the face of Wang Fang's reprimand, Wang Zong still laughed heartily. What else can we do now? We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. Wang Zong did not seem to be worried about the law enforcement hall at all. While the siblings were talking, Yuqing and Lian Su came to Wang Zong's side and bowed respectfully. Senior brother Wang Zong. Oh, it's Yuqing and Yuqing. You guys are here too. Wang Zong said with a smile. Yuqing and Yuqing's lips twitched when they heard this. However, they did not say anything. It was obvious that they knew Wang Zong's character. Now that He Chushun was dead, Yuqing had no reason to fight with Xiaochen. As for how Xiaochen would face the law enforcement hall, that was not something the two of them needed to worry about. Therefore, they merely greeted Wang Zong before the two of them took their leave. After Yuqing and Lian Su left, only Xiaochen's group of 4 remained. There were no outsiders. Wang Fang came to Wang Zong's side and grabbed his hand anxiously, constantly shaking it. "Brother, what should we do now? Hurry up and think of a way. Otherwise, the law enforcement hall won't let Xiaochen off." He was well aware of the severity of killing a personal disciple in private. Moreover, since the establishment of Tianfeng Zone, such a thing had never happened before. A core disciple had actually killed a personal disciple in private. Wang Fang impatiently pleaded. In response, Wang Zong smiled helplessly and said, "You, let go of me first. If you continue to shake me, my arm will break." Hearing this, Wang Fang let go of his hand and asked, "So you have a way?" Hearing this, Wang Zong was completely helpless. He glanced at Ichushuan's corpse and said with a smile, "Why don't we bury him? If we don't find his corpse, Junior Xiaochen will be able to say whatever he wants. After all, the dead tell no tales. Bury the bodies." Hearing Wang Zong's words, Xiaochen and the other two were speechless. Was this guy joking? The battle just now was so intense. Moreover, there were two witnesses, Yu Cheng and Lian Su. Even if they buried He Chushuan's corpse, what could they do? Moreover, with the law enforcement hall's methods, even if the four of them buried He Chushuan's corpse, it would not take long for it to be found. Seeing that Xiaochen and the other two did not agree with this method, Wang Zong continued. "If we can't bury him, how about we dismember him? Bury him and dismember him." This was Wang Zong's method. Hearing this, Wang Fang was completely enraged. She immediately gave Wang Zong a fierce beating. Facing his sister, although Wang Zong was strong, he pretended to be beaten up and cried out in pain. Seeing the siblings fighting, Xiaochen was not as nervous as they imagined. Since they had already killed him, what else could they do? They could only take it one step at a time. "Xiaochen, what should we do now? The law enforcement hall will definitely come for you," Gu Lingyao said worriedly as she leaned on Xiaochen. Facing Gu Lingyao's worry, Xiaochen gently stroked the hair on her forehead and smiled gently. "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Just as Xiaochen and Gu Lingyao were talking, Wang Zong suddenly stopped. The smile on his face slowly disappeared as he looked at the sky and said calmly, "Junior Xiaochen, the people from the law enforcement hall are here." The people from the law enforcement hall were here. Hearing Wang Zong's words, Wang Fang and Gu Lingyao's expressions immediately changed. However, Xiaochen was very calm. He was just a little surprised that the people from the law enforcement hall were here so quickly. Like Wang Zong, he looked at the sky. Soon, a group of 8 deacons from the law enforcement hall appeared in front of everyone. Sending 8 deacons showed how important this matter was to the law enforcement hall. When the 8 of them appeared, their expressions were incomparably cold. One of them directly went to Ichushuan's corpse and did a simple check. After confirming that Ichushuan was dead, he turned his head and nodded to the other 7 deacons. Seeing this, the leader stepped forward and looked directly at Xiaochen. His voice was calm but incomparably cold. "Xiaochen, did you kill Ichushuan?" Although the 8 deacons had always been incomparably cold, they were actually extremely shocked at this moment. Previously, the law enforcement hall had received news that Xiaochen and Ichushuan had a private fight. However, they did not know that Xiaochen had actually killed Ichushuan. Now that they had arrived at the scene and confirmed that Ichushuan was dead, how could the 8 of them not be serious? Faced with the deacon's question, Xiaochen did not quibble. He nodded and replied, "I killed him. If that's the case, then come with us." Xiaochen admitted it personally. Then, the deacon said coldly. Naturally, it was not easy to get away with killing a direct disciple. Hearing that Xiaochen was going to be taken to the law enforcement hall, Gu Lingyao grabbed Xiaochen's arm tightly and said stubbornly, "I'll go with you. What do you think the law enforcement hall is? Do you think you can go as you please? Xiaochen, do you want to come with us or do you want to fight us?" Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, the deacon shouted in a deep voice. He could only let Xiaochen go alone. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao wanted to say something but was stopped by Xiaochen.
After giving Gu Lingyao a reassuring look, Xiaochen said slowly, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Go back with Wang Fang first." After telling Gu Lingyao not to worry about him, Xiaochen left with the 8 deacons from the law enforcement hall. At the same time, He Chushuan's corpse was naturally taken away by the law enforcement hall. Seeing Xiaochen leave with the law enforcement hall, Gu Lingyao was stunned and speechless. Seeing this, Wang Fang stepped forward and comforted her. "Lingyao, don't worry too much. Don't worry, there will be a way. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 6:16. Wang Fang was worried that Gu Lingyao would not be able to think things through and do something extreme. If that happened, it would be even more troublesome. Hence, she spoke up to console him. Hearing Wang Fang's words, Gu Lingyao replied expressionlessly, "Don't worry, I won't do anything stupid. I'm a little tired and want to go back and rest." After speaking, Gu Lingyao turned around and left. Seeing this, Wang Fang was worried about Gu Lingyao. She hurriedly bid farewell to Wang Zong and hurriedly chased after him. "If anything happens to Xiaochen, I won't let you off the hook," Yi Fujian said. These were the words that Wang Fang said to Wang Zong before she left. Her meaning was very clear. No matter what Wang Zong did, he had to rescue Xiaochen. Seeing Wang Fang hurriedly chasing after Gu Lingyao, Wang Zong wanted to cry but had no tears. What was going on? He did not know that he had asked Xiaochen to kill Yi Chushuan. Why was he responsible for Xiaochen being taken away by the law enforcement hall? Furthermore, the person that Xiaochen killed was a direct disciple. It was easier said than done to rescue him. When he thought of the perverted old man in charge of the law enforcement hall, Wang Zong felt a chill run down his spine. In Wang Zong's opinion, rescuing someone from the hands of that perverted old man was no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. Sigh, what sin have I committed to have such a sister? Sigh, the heavens are unfair, the heavens are unfair. After a series of sighs, Wang Zong lowered his head and left with a gloomy expression. He had to think of a way to rescue Xiaochen. Accompanied by Wang Fang, Gu Lingyao returned to his residence. However, once he returned, Gu Lingyao locked himself in his room and ignored Wang Fang. Because of that, Wang Fang didn't dare to leave, so she could only stay at Gu Lingyao's place. However, Wang Fang worried too much. Gu Lingyao knew that it wasn't the right time to add fuel to the fire, so he didn't do anything drastic. Instead, he told his father, Gu Qi, about it and hoped that he could come up with a solution. Wang Zong and Gu Lingyao were thinking of ways to help Xiaochen. At the same time, Xiaochen followed the 8 deacons to the Tianfeng Xingzong Law Enforcement Hall. Unlike other places in Tianfeng Xingzong, there was no one around except for the people who belonged to the Law Enforcement Hall. It seemed a little cold and desolate. However, this was also very normal. After all, what kind of place was the Law Enforcement Hall? Who would run here all day long? It could be said that the Law Enforcement Hall was the most deserted place in Tianfeng Xingzong. Under the guidance of several deacons, Xiaochen walked all the way to the Law Enforcement Hall. The layout of the Law Enforcement Hall was very simple. It was a small courtyard, and the walls and door were painted with black paint. There were only 2 colors in the Law Enforcement Hall. One was black, and the other was red. At the same time, he didn't know if it was because this place had been deserted for many years, but when he walked into the Law Enforcement Hall, a chilly wind blew against his face, giving him a chilling feeling. Cold, grim, and solemn. This was the feeling that the Law Enforcement Hall gave Xiaochen. After passing through the front yard, Xiaochen quickly arrived at the Law Enforcement Hall's main hall. At the end of the hall, there was a wooden armchair. On the wall behind it, there were the words Justice, Strict, and Ming. However, these words were written in red paint, and looked a little scary. When Xiaochen arrived at the center of the hall, the 8 deacons who were responsible for escorting Xiaochen consciously separated into 2 sides and stood proudly. At the same time, an old man in a black robe appeared on the empty wooden armchair.
The old man's face was thin and full of wrinkles, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. There was no expression on his face, as if he was a dead man. Facing this old man, Xiao Chen's first feeling was coldness. This old man was too cold. Whether it was his appearance or his aura, it gave people the feeling that they had fallen into an ice cellar. The old man's name was Yan Xing, and he was the head elder of the law enforcement hall. He was in charge of all punishments in Tianfeng Zone. It was no exaggeration to say that Yan Xing was the demon in the hearts of all Tianfeng Zone disciples. If one were to ask who they were most afraid of in Tianfeng Zone, Yan Xing would definitely be the number one. Without a doubt, even the two Tianfeng saints couldn't compare to him. Yan Xing looked at Xiao Chen expressionlessly. After a long silence, he finally opened his mouth to speak. However, his voice was like the sound of metal rubbing against each other. It was sharp and hoarse, and it made people feel uncomfortable. Xiao Chen, do you know your crime? To be honest, facing Yan Xing, Xiao Chen felt a lot of pressure. It was even greater than facing the Tianfeng saint. Of course, this didn't mean that Yan Xing was stronger than the Tianfeng saint. Yan Xing was only a half-step saint. In terms of strength, he was naturally weaker than the Tianfeng saint. However, the feeling he gave off was completely different from the Tianfeng saint. This was where Xiao Chen's pressure came from. Resisting the pressure from Yan Xing, Xiao Chen replied in a low voice, "I don't know what crime I have committed." "How dare you? You killed a direct disciple of Glory sect in public. Isn't that a serious crime?" Hearing Xiao Chen's reply, Yan Xing shouted in a low voice. Following his shout, an extremely cold aura emanated from Yan Xing's body. It was as if he could send people into hell. The pressure on him increased once more. Gritting his teeth, Xiao Chen braced himself and said, "I've heard that Glory Sect's law enforcement hall is strict and just. But why did an elder ask about the cause and effect of the matter before deciding that I have committed a crime?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yan Xing retracted his aura and asked, "All right, I'll give you a chance. Tell me what happened." Although Yan Xing gave off a fierce and cold aura, those who were familiar with him knew that he was definitely a strict and just person. It was because of this that the Tianfeng saint allowed him to be in charge of Glory Sect's law enforcement. He had the power to decide life and death. Hearing Yan Xing's words, Xiao Chen recounted the entire incident truthfully. He did not exaggerate or hide anything. After hearing Xiao Chen's story, Yan Xing's expression softened. At least when he looked at Xiao Chen, he no longer had that cold look from before. Originally, Xiao Chen killing Yi Chuxuan should have been a death sentence in Yan Xing's eyes. But after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yan Xing asked himself if Yi Chuxuan deserved to die for doing such a thing. It was understandable, and Yi Chuxuan deserved to die. But no matter what, Xiao Chen had violated the rules of the sect by killing someone. It was impossible for Yan Xing to let him go just like that. Looking at Xiao Chen expressionlessly, Yan Xing was thinking about how to punish Xiao Chen. Originally, Xiao Chen should have been sentenced to death. But now that Xiao Chen was a rare genius, killing him would be a loss to Glory Sect. Just as Yan Xing was thinking about how to punish him, He Feng's figure appeared in the main hall. Looking at Yan Xing, He Feng smiled and said, "Old man Yan, you can't kill Xiao Chen. Tomorrow, I'll release 10 chapters. Consider it as making up for the 6 chapters that I owe. It's not easy to save up chapters. But since I'm out here, I'll have to pay it back. Starting tomorrow at 12 noon. Brothers, please support me. Thank you." Chapter 617. He Feng appeared out of nowhere and said that Xiao Chen couldn't be killed. Hearing this, Yan Xing said expressionlessly, "Great Elder, are you here to plead for Xiao Chen?" In terms of status, He Feng was higher than Yan Xing. After all, He Feng was the Great Elder of Tianfeng Xingzong, the most powerful person under the Tianfeng Saint. Normally, the Tianfeng Saint wouldn't care about anything. It was He Feng who was in charge of all the affairs of the sect. Facing He Feng,
who had a higher status than him and was very familiar with him, Yanxing didn't give him any face at all. He even changed the way he addressed Yifeng. Normally, Yifeng would call Yanxing Old Man Yan, and Yanxing would call Yifeng Old Man He. But now, Yanxing was calling Yifeng Old Man He. It was obvious that Yanxing wasn't happy about it. Xiaochen had indeed violated the rules of the sect, which was something that Yanxing could not deny. Since Xiaochen had made a mistake, he should be punished. However, it was Yanxing's way of doing things, and no one could plead for mercy on his behalf. Therefore, Yanxing said unhappily after hearing Yifeng's words. Knowing that Yanxing was unhappy that he was pleading for Xiaochen, Yifeng didn't mind at all. I say, Old Man Yan, I've already asked for mercy. Are you not going to give me any face? Yifeng didn't deny that he was pleading for mercy for Xiaochen. Instead, he admitted it openly. Hearing this, Yanxing's eyes flashed with coldness. Great Elder, this is not a matter of face. If everyone comes to me to ask for face in the future, then my law enforcement hall will no longer exist. Since they have violated the rules of the sect, it will be useless for anyone to plead for leniency. Facing Yifeng's pleading, Yanxing didn't buy it. In Tianfeng Zone, Yanxing was famous for his stubbornness. No one could change his mind once he decided on something, except for the Tianfeng Saint. It was because of his stubbornness and selflessness that the disciples of Tianfeng Zone were so afraid of the disciplinary hall that he led. Because once you entered this place, as long as you made a mistake, no matter what your status was, you would be punished. In the past, Wang Zong had also fallen into the hands of a harsh punishment. Back then, Wang Zong was caught stealing wine from Glory Sect and was sent to the law enforcement hall. Many elders came to plead on Wang Zong's behalf, but it was useless. In the end, Wang Zong was locked up in Black Wind Stream for an entire year. It was also because of that experience that Wang Zong became quite fearful of this old man, Yanxing. It couldn't be helped. This old man was too stubborn. He had only secretly drunk some wine and was actually locked up in the Black Wind Stream. Yifeng bluntly rejected Yifeng. Seeing this, Yifeng smiled and said, I say, Old Man Yan, you're already so old, why are you still so stubborn? How about this? I have 2 jars of good wine, your favorite fire cloud wine. I'll give them to you, how about it? Since he couldn't save face, Yifeng started to bribe him. Everyone who knew Yanxing well knew that this stubborn old man loved to drink, especially good wine. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he loved wine as much as his life. If it were any other time, Yanxing would definitely be overjoyed if Yifeng gave 2 jars of fire cloud wine to him. But now, Yanxing didn't hesitate at all in the face of Yifeng's temptations. Yifeng, who do you think I am? Say no more. Xiaochen violated the rules of the sect. Although there was a reason for it, it was still a fact that he killed He Chushuan. He can escape death, but he can't escape punishment. As punishment, Xiaochen will be locked up in Black Wind Stream for 100 years. It was obvious that Yanxing was really angry. After calling out Yifeng's name and scolding him, he immediately announced Xiaochen's punishment. Although being locked up in Black Wind Stream for 100 years saved his life, it was undeniable that Xiaochen was basically crippled. Thinking about it, 100 years of emptiness was unbearable for any young cultivator. After 100 years, when Xiaochen regained his freedom, those of the same generation as him would have already surpassed him. Moreover, 100 years of emptiness was enough to deplete most of Xiaochen's talent, turning him into a cripple. Seeing that Yanxing directly announced Xiaochen's punishment, Yifeng didn't change his expression at all. He wasn't nervous, and he still had a smile on his face. I say, Old Man Yan, aren't you too cruel? 100 years in Black Wind Stream? Are you trying to completely end Xiaochen's life? Hearing Yifeng's words, Yanxing said coldly, he killed someone. I'm already being merciful by sparing his life. Yifeng, you don't have to say anymore. Even if you are the great elder, this is the law enforcement hall. I have the final say. Men, take Xiaochen away. Immediately, 2 deacons of the law enforcement hall stepped forward and prepared to take Xiaochen away.
Seeing this, Yifeng suddenly shouted. Wait! Now that things had gotten to this point, Yifeng still wanted to stop them. This completely infuriated Yanxing. He slammed the remaining armchair and stood up. The armchair shattered, and a terrifying cold aura emanated from his body. He glared at Yifeng angrily. Yifeng, I'll say it again. This is the law enforcement hall. If you still want to stop me, don't blame me for being merciless. Yanxing was truly enraged, but Yifeng still had a smile on his face. Xiaochen, who was standing at the side, found it strange as well. In fact, Xiaochen had been thinking about how to deal with the situation ever since Yanxing announced his punishment. After all, Xiaochen could not afford to waste 100 years. Yifeng said with a smile, not changing his expression because of Yanxing's anger. What, old man Yan, do you still want to fight with me? Humph, come at me. Do you think I'm afraid of you? No matter who begs for mercy today, I, Yanxing, won't listen, Yanxing said. Yanxing was really stubborn and didn't know how to be flexible. To him, wrong was wrong, and right was right. Hearing Yanxing's words, the smile on Yifeng's face became even brighter. He then took out a golden token from his storage ring and said to Yanxing with a faint smile. What if the Lord Sacred Master comes? Don't tell me you won't listen. The Lord Sacred Master is different, but why would the Lord Sacred Master, if the Tianfeng Saint came to plead for mercy, it would be different, but why would the Tianfeng Saint come? Just as he was speaking, Yanxing saw the token in Yifeng's hand. His expression changed and his voice came to an abrupt halt. The Heavenly Wind Holy Insignia was the identity insignia of the Heavenly Wind Saint. Seeing the insignia was equivalent to seeing the Heavenly Wind Saint himself. Yanxing was stunned. Seeing this, Yifeng laughed evilly, as if his evil plan had worked. He then looked serious and raised the Heavenly Wind Holy Insignia high up in the air. Elder of the Law Enforcement Hall, Yanxing, listen to my orders. Following Yifeng's words, Yanxing put his hands together and bowed respectfully. Yanxing is here to listen to the Lord Sacred Master's orders. First update, brothers, please support me. Please collect me, please vote me, please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 6:18. Yanxing was really a stubborn old man. He had an angry look on his face just now, but after seeing the Heavenly Wind Sacred Badge, he immediately bowed respectfully. Looking at the respectful Yanxing, Yifeng's eyes flashed with pride, but he still said loudly. Lord Saint's order is that Chushuan is a despicable and narrow-minded person. He should not be a direct disciple of Glory Sect. Today, even though Xiaochen killed Chushuan, he was not punished. Instead, he is now the 10th direct disciple of Glory Sect and will be given the Heavenly Wind Robe. Yifeng shouted out Saint Tianfeng's command. Hearing this, Yanxing respectfully replied. Seeing this, Yifeng slowly put away the Heavenly Wind Saint decree. However, at that moment, Yanxing suddenly threw a punch at Yifeng. Facing Yanxing's sudden attack, Yifeng dodged to the side and shouted angrily, Old man Yan, are you crazy? Yifeng did not expect Yanxing to attack suddenly. Of course, he did not use his full strength, not even his spiritual energy. Facing Yifeng's angry shout, Yanxing pursed his lips and said, I'm crazy? Old man don't you know what you did? Me? What did I do? Yifeng said. Humph, don't give me that. You clearly have the Lord Saint's sacred badge, and you even pretended to plead for Xiaochen. Are you making fun of me? Yanxing said. The moment Yifeng took out the Heavenly Wind sacred badge, Yanxing knew that he had been tricked. Yifeng was here under the Lord Saint's orders, but he did not show the badge. Damn it. Hearing this, Yifeng laughed awkwardly. Haha, old man Yan, I was just joking with you. Ha, don't mind it, don't mind it. Humph, give me your 2 jars of fire cloud wine, and I won't mind it. Otherwise, I'm not done with this. Yanxing said coldly. Fire cloud wine. Hearing this, Yifeng's expression changed slightly, and he cursed in his heart, "Old bastard, I knew you would want my 2 jars of fire cloud wine." The fire cloud wine was the best wine in the Sky Wind Palace, and it was produced in very small quantities. It was not something that could be bought with money. Yifeng felt a little heartache, but after hesitating for a moment, he still chose to compromise. He took out 2 perfectly sealed jars of wine from his storage ring and handed them to Yan Xingdao. Here you go, old drunkard." Seeing the 2 jars of fire cloud wine flying toward him, Yan Xing's eyes flashed with joy. It was as if he had seen a peerless beauty and was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. He grabbed the 2 jars of wine and put them into his storage ring at lightning speed. Xiaochen secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the 2 old men laughing and fooling around. It seemed like everything would be fine. However, he didn't expect that the Tianfeng Saint would appear in the end. But this was also good. If the Tianfeng Saint didn't appear, it would be troublesome for Xiaochen if the Tianfeng Saint didn't appear. Just now, although Yifeng was teasing him, if it was not for the Sky Wind Saint token, Yanxing would not have compromised. With the Tianfeng Saint's verbal instruction, Xiaochen was naturally fine. Not only was he fine, but he had also profited from his misfortune and become one of the top 10 personal disciples of the Tianfeng Holy Sect. It was like a carp leaping into the dragon. Who would have thought that things would end up like this? Seeing this, the 8 deacons in the hall looked at each other with a hint of relief in their eyes. Fortunately, they did not disrespect Xiaochen and did not torture him. This way, Xiaochen would not hold a grudge against them. The matter seemed to have ended perfectly. After the 2 old men quarreled with each other for a while, it finally ended with Yanxing treating them to a drink. Then, the 2 old men's eyes fell on Xiaochen at the same time. Yanxing spoke first. "Since the Lord has given the order, Xiaochen, you may leave the law enforcement hall. However, if you dare to violate the sect rules in the future, I will not forgive you." Yanxing indicated that Xiaochen could leave, but Yifeng stopped Xiaochen in time. "Wait." He asked Xiaochen to wait. Hearing this, Xiaochen looked at Yifeng, waiting for him to continue. Facing Xiaochen's gaze, Yifeng purposely put on a stern face and walked slowly in front of Xiaochen, seemingly angry. "Little guy, what I said to you just now, you really didn't listen to a single word." Yifeng scolded Xiaochen. Hearing this, Xiaochen suddenly remembered that Yifeng had specifically reminded him before they left the lava river. "Xiaochen, remember one thing. The sect rules are not to be violated, and you are not to kill in public within the sect. Do you understand?" However, Xiaochen had completely forgotten about it. Facing such a situation, Xiaochen was not in the mood to care about the sect rules. He smiled embarrassedly. After all, Yifeng had already reminded him, but he did not take it seriously. It was indeed wrong of him to ignore it. Seeing Xiaochen's embarrassed smile, Yifeng snorted coldly. "Humph, you still have the cheek to smile. Although the Lord has forgiven you this time, do you think that's the end? I have a mission for you. Let's make it clear that you cannot reject it. Consider it atonement. How about it, you have no objections?" Xiaochen did not know that Yifeng had a mission for him. Other than being the great elder of Tianfeng Xingzong, Yifeng was also in charge of the Hall of Missions and Glory Sect. He was in charge of all the missions and rewards in Tianfeng Xingzong. Forcefully giving Xiaochen a mission, Xiaochen did not reject it. After all, Yifeng had treated him well, and had even helped him a lot this time. Since Yifeng had a mission for him, Xiaochen had no reason to reject it. He passed a memory stone to Xiaochen. It contained all the information about the mission. This memory stone was actually similar to the skill-imparting jade. However, compared to the skill-imparting jade, this memory stone was cheaper. At the same time, the memory stone could store less information, and could only store simple text information. In the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect, every mission was recorded in a memory stone. After a disciple accepted a mission, they would be able to obtain a memory stone related to the mission. Through the memory stone, they would be able to clearly and intuitively understand the mission's requirements, difficulty, danger, and so on. After receiving the memory stone, Xiaochen bowed to Yifeng. Seeing this, Yifeng said in an annoyed tone. Remember, this mission only requires you to succeed, not fail. Also, give me your identity token. After taking away Xiaochen's identity token, Yifeng handed a brand new one to Xiaochen. This was the identity token of one of the top 10 pro-disciples. At the same time, a brand new Tianfeng robe was also handed to Xiaochen. Second update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 619. Yifeng waved his hand and said after handing over the new identity token and the heavenly wind long robe to Xiaochen. Go, the news of you being promoted to a direct disciple will be announced to the entire sect soon. But remember, you must complete the mission I gave you perfectly. Otherwise, you'll be in for a treat. Make the arrangements quickly and leave. Hearing Yifeng's words, Xiaochen bowed and said, Then, I'll take my leave. Yifeng walked out of the disciplinary hall safe and sound. After Xiaochen left, Yifeng looked at Yan Xing excitedly and said, Old man Yan, let's go and have a drink. Old man, I worked so hard to get these 2 jars of Firecloud wine. Don't think you're keeping them for yourself. Yan Xing did not reject Yifeng's eagerness to drink, but he still said with a serious face, Let's make things clear first. You can only drink 1 jar at most. The other jar is mine. Okay. Just 1 jar, okay? With that, Yifeng pulled Yan Xing out of the disciplinary hall. Who knew where the 2 old men went to drink? The matter was resolved so easily. But on the way back, Xiaochen suddenly realized that the Tianfeng saint might have been paying attention to this matter from the start. That was why Yifeng was able to rush over in such a timely manner. In other words, from the start, killing He Chushuan would not be a problem. This was because the Tianfeng saint had given him permission to do so. Realizing this, Xiaochen laughed self-deprecatingly, Seems like I'm worrying too much. Everything is under the Tianfeng saint's control. There was no need to worry about anything in the first place. Just as Xiaochen was thinking about that, a bell suddenly rang from the top of Tianfeng's sacred mountain. The sound of the bell rang through every corner of the Tianfeng Saint Mountain. Hearing this sound, all the disciples and deacons of the Glory sect turned their attention to the peak of the mountain. All the disciples knew that the sound of the bell meant that something big was about to happen in the Glory sect. It could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. The sound of the bell reverberated through Tianfeng's sacred mountain. After a long while, it gradually dissipated. At the same time, a golden screen of light appeared at the peak of Tianfeng's sacred mountain. The screen of light emitted a faint golden light. The golden light screen seemed to connect the peak of the mountain to the sky. Slowly, a line of words appeared on the screen. First core disciple, Xiaochen, is promoted to the 10th direct disciple. It was a simple sentence, but it was enough to send chills down the spines of all the disciples of Glory sect. Someone had been promoted to a disciple. Someone. Disciple. At the same time, Gu Lingyao, who was still locked in her room. Lingyao. Look. Quick. Of the. Lingyao. Look. Looking at the direction Wang Fang was pointing at, Gu Lingyao covered her mouth in shock. She couldn't believe it. Wasn't Xiaochen brought to the disciplinary hall? How did he become a direct disciple all of a sudden? And the 10th direct disciple? Didn't that mean that Xiaochen had replaced He Chushuan's position? She couldn't believe the light screen hanging in the sky. Wang Fang said slowly, Xiaochen has been promoted to the 10th direct disciple. Doesn't that mean he's fine now? Think about it. If the disciplinary hall wanted to punish Xiaochen, why would they let him be the 10th direct disciple? Although she didn't know why, Wang Fang guessed that Xiaochen should be fine now. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao was overjoyed. Her eyes reddened and she cried tears of joy. She was happy for Xiaochen, not only because Xiaochen had been promoted to the 10th direct disciple, but also because Xiaochen was able to get out of danger.
The two women were very excited. On the other side, in the area of the 10 direct disciples, Yuchen, Lian Su, Wang Zong and the other direct disciples in Tianfeng Zone were all looking up at the light screen on the mountain peak. They were all shocked. This guy actually replaced He Chushuan's position. Yuchen said softly to himself. Replaced He Chushuan? That's good. In this way, the 10 direct disciples in Tianfeng Zone are worthy of their name. Lian Su said. I think I understand what the Lord is trying to say. Sigh, I've worried for nothing. No, I have to ask Xiaochen to treat me to a drink. Otherwise, I would be at a disadvantage. I've helped him so many times, so I have to ask him to treat me to a drink, Wang Zong said with a smirk. The replacement of the direct disciples shocked Tianfeng Zone. Every replacement of the direct disciples could be said to be a major event in Tianfeng Zone. After all, the 10 direct disciples not only represented the 10 strongest people of Tianfeng Zone's younger generation, but also represented the face and future of Tianfeng Zone. For example, in the competition with the Tianyue sacred sect and other surrounding sacred sects, the strength of the 10 direct disciples often represented the strength of Tianfeng Zone. After recovering from their initial shock, all of the disciples quickly realized a problem. The Iron Sword sect was likely going to suffer a calamity. Xiaochen replaced He Chushuan's position and became the 10th direct disciple. In this way, the Iron Sword sect would have one less direct disciple, while the Tianqi sect would have one more direct disciple. Secondly, there was a rumor that Yiteng wasn't in Glory sect right now. Without Yiteng holding the fort, what could Iron Sword sect use to fight against Tianqi sect? Judging from the Iron Sword sect's actions, the Tianqi sect would definitely not let the matter rest. They would definitely launch a crazy revenge. Ha! People of the Iron Sword sect, wash your butts and wait. A disciple of the Tianqi sect had already begun to laugh loudly. Not only that, but there were even disciples of the Tianqi sect who had begun to go out to look for the Iron Sword sect. In the ordinary disciple area, the disciples of the Tianqi sect went out in groups of 3 to 5. When they saw the disciples of the Iron Sword sect, they went up to them and beat them up without saying a word. Who asked you to be arrogant and show off? Beat them up. Beat them up. Without He Chushuan, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect naturally lost their momentum. They were no match for them at all. For a time, the ordinary disciple area was filled with battles between the disciples of the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect. Of course, this time, it was completely reversed. It was the disciples of the Tianqi sect who beat up the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Third update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 620. Xiaochen's promotion to the 10th direct disciple actually caused a series of chain reactions. The most obvious ones were naturally the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect. The Iron Sword sect, which could have been said to be firmly suppressing the Celestial Equal sect, was now completely stunned. They had never imagined that He Chushuan would be kicked off his pedestal by Xiaochen in the blink of an eye, ending up dead and his Dao vanishing. Not only was Xiaochen not punished for openly killing one of the top 10 direct disciples, but he was also like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. This kind of result was unacceptable to the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. The situation had completely reversed. This time, it was the disciples of the Iron Sword sect who became the target of scorn. Of course, Xiaochen was unaware of this. At this moment, Xiaochen was walking all the way from the law enforcement hall. Just as he arrived at Gu Lingyao's residence, he saw the little girl standing at the entrance of the courtyard, looking expectantly at him. Seeing Xiaochen, Gu Lingyao directly threw herself into his arms and hugged Xiaochen tightly. Seeing this, Xiaochen smiled and said, "What's wrong? I've become a direct disciple. Why are you crying? Did someone bully you? Tell me, I'll teach him a lesson for you." Seeing Gu Lingyao's red eyes, Xiaochen deliberately made fun of her. However, just as his voice fell, a cold laugh sounded. "What if I say it's me? Is senior brother Xiaochen going to teach me a lesson too?" Hearing this, Xiaochen saw Wang Fang with her arms crossed in front of her chest and a smile on her face. Seeing this, Xiaochen smiled slightly. How would I dare? Junior sister Wang Fang is someone with a backer. I'm not a match for senior brother Wang Zong. Xiaochen knew that Wang Fang was joking, and Wang Fang had helped her a lot, so she wasn't angry at all. She held Gu Lingyao's hand and walked into the small yard. Now that it was over, Xiaochen was not only fine, but also benefited from the disaster. It was a happy ending. The worry in his heart dissipated, and Gu Lingyao quickly adjusted himself. He kept pestering Xiaochen to wear the heavenly wind robe for him to see. The heavenly wind robe was a symbol of status and a symbol of a personal disciple. Xiaochen couldn't stand the little girl's pestering, so he took out the heavenly wind robe from his storage ring and put it on. The pure white robe was very loose and extended all the way to her ankles. Looking at Xiaochen, who was wearing the heavenly wind robe, Gu Lingyao's eyes were filled with stars. She said with a smile, "So beautiful." All right, isn't it just a heavenly wind robe? My brother has one too. Why don't you take a second look at it?" Wang Fang said unhappily when she saw Gu Lingyao's expression. "That's different. Xiaochen looks better in the heavenly wind robe than other personal disciples." Gu Lingyao immediately retorted when she heard Wang Fang's words. In fact, the little girl wasn't exaggerating. The heavenly wind robe was a top-grade defensive heavenly weapon. When Xiaochen wore it, his entire aura was enhanced. Gu Lingyao turned to look at Xiaochen and said arrogantly, "In the future, you're not allowed to take off the heavenly wind robe. You have to wear it." "Why?" Xiaochen said helplessly. "Because it looks good. Brother Xiaochen wearing the heavenly wind robe is truly perfect," Gu Lingyao said with a smile. Gu Lingyao wasn't the only one who liked the way Xiaochen looked in the heavenly wind robe. Wang Fang secretly glanced at Xiaochen and said softly with a pout, "This guy does look better in the heavenly wind robe than my brother." Wang Fang's face blushed as she said that. Not knowing what Wang Fang was thinking, under Gu Lingyao's insistence, Xiaochen could only nod his head and agree in the end. Originally, wearing the heavenly wind robe wasn't a big deal. Furthermore, the heavenly wind robe was extremely comfortable to wear. It didn't have much weight and at the same time, it had a certain defensive effect. It was very good and was indeed a treasure. That night, Xiaochen stayed at Gu Lingyao's place to celebrate with the two girls. As for the night, he naturally had a good time with Gu Lingyao. The next morning, Xiaochen woke up and smiled at Gu Lingyao, who was sleeping soundly like a kitten. Then, he got up and washed up. However, he didn't forget the task that Yifeng gave him. Xiaochen went to the stone bench in the courtyard and sat down. He took out the memory stone and inserted his spiritual energy into it. Instantly, a wave of information was transmitted to Xiaochen's mind through his spiritual energy. It was as if the information was imprinted in his mind. Without even looking at it, Xiaochen already knew the requirements of this task. It was a very convenient memory stone. However, after the information was extracted by Xiaochen, the memory stone became useless and became an ordinary stone. Xiaochen casually threw the memory stone away and closed his eyes to recall the information about this task in his mind. From the description of the task, this task was a rescue mission and was classified as an Earth task. Tianfeng Xingzong's tasks were divided into 3 levels: Heaven, Earth, and Human. Heaven tasks were the highest, Human tasks were the lowest, and Earth tasks were the middle. According to the description of the task, there was a group of bandits hiding deep in the mountains in the south of Tianfeng Prefecture. They were called the Qingma Gang. This group of bandits was extremely cunning and basically operated deep in the mountains and forests. They overdid things like robbing houses and kidnapping people for ransom. This time, there were more than 10 Tianfeng Xingzong disciples who had accepted a guard mission. However, when they were massacring the south of Tianfeng Prefecture, they were intercepted by the Qingma Gang. Not only did they rob the disciples of their treasures and an extremely important member of the main family of Tianfeng Prefecture, they even detained the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. It was unknown whether these people were dead or alive, but the actions of the Qingma gang had clearly angered Tianfeng's. Therefore, the task clearly stated that this time, not only did they have to rescue the disciples of Tianfeng's and the main family member of the main family of Tianfeng Prefecture, they also had to eliminate the Qingma gang. Surrender was not accepted, and they had to be uprooted. Secondly, for the rescue targets, regardless of whether they were alive or dead, their bodies had to be found. Xiaochen slowly opened his eyes after he had basically grasped the situation of the mission. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "A rescue and annihilation mission in one? But this Qingma gang is really daring. They even dared to kidnap the disciples of Tianfeng's. Looks like Glory Sect is determined to eliminate these bandits this time. But, how do I find their base?" The task description only gave a general area. According to the known clues, the Qingma gang's base should be in this area. However, the exact location could not be determined. Therefore, Xiaochen had to think of a way to find the Qingma gang's base. Only then could he proceed with the next step of the operation. Fourth update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.